In 7 years of marriage, my wife had never taken me to one of her company parties. At an important dinner with her company's partners, I started conversing in another language with them, and the color instantly drained from her face. But there are moments in a marriage when you notice the silence more than the words. Not the comfortable kind of silence, the kind where you're both reading on the couch, where presence is enough. No, I'm talking about the silence that has weight. The kind that presses against your chest when you ask a simple question and watch your wife's eyes flicker away just for a second before she answers. 7 years. That's how long Emma and I had been married when everything changed. 7 years of what I thought was a good life. We had a house in the suburbs with a garden I actually cared about. We had routines: Friday night movies, Sunday morning farmers market runs, the kind of life that looks perfect in photographs. The kind people double tap on social media and think they've got it figured out. But here's the thing about photographs. They only show you one frozen moment. They don't show you what happened 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after. They don't show you the careful editing, the things deliberately left out of frame. For 7 years, Emma's work life existed in a space I wasn't allowed to enter. Not physically, of course. I'd dropped her off at the office plenty of times. I knew where the building was, had seen the sleek glass facade, the corporate logo gleaming in the sun. I'd met exactly 2 of her colleagues in passing, brief introductions in a grocery store parking lot. The kind of encounter where everyone's already thinking about getting home. But her company parties, her corporate events, the dinners with partners and clients, I had never been invited to a single one. "It's just work stuff," she'd say, applying lipstick in our bedroom mirror, dressed in one of those elegant black dresses that cost more than my entire wardrobe. "You'd be bored to death. Just a bunch of corporate talk and networking. Really, you're lucky you don't have to go." And I believed her because why wouldn't I? She'd kiss me on the cheek, leave a trace of her perfume in the air, and I'd watch her car pull out of the driveway, heading to some restaurant I'd never been to, some event I'd never see. I'd order takeout, watch television, and tell myself that this was normal, that plenty of couples kept their work lives separate. If you've ever convinced yourself that something wrong is actually right, you know how good humans are at rationalization. We can twist anything into a shape that lets us sleep at night. We can call isolation independence. We can call exclusion boundaries. We can turn 7 years of being kept at arm's length from an entire section of your spouse's life into something reasonable until you can't anymore. It was a Tuesday in October when Emma came home with something different in her expression. Not quite nervousness, but close. She set her bag down on the kitchen counter where I was chopping vegetables for dinner, and she didn't immediately head upstairs to change like she usually did. So she said, and I heard something in that single syllable, "There's this dinner coming up." I glanced up from the cutting board. Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. The managing partners from our international divisions are flying in. Singapore, Frankfurt, São Paulo. They only do this every few years. She was fidgeting with her watch, spinning it around her wrist. It's at Lawrence. Lawrence. Even I knew that name. The kind of restaurant where reservations were made 3 months in advance, where the menu was prefixed and the bill could cover a mortgage payment. "Sounds fancy," I said, returning to the vegetables. I was making stir-fry, something simple. "It is. And they're encouraging everyone to bring their spouses this time to make it more personal, less formal." The knife stopped moving. I looked at her fully then, and she was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hope? Fear? Something in between. "You want me to come?" I asked. "I think it would be good," she said carefully, "for you to meet everyone." Finally. Finally. That word hung in the air between us like smoke. Finally, after 7 years. Finally, after countless events and parties and dinners. Finally. I should have asked why. I should have questioned the sudden change, but I was too caught up in the feeling of being invited, of finally being included in this part of her life that had always been behind a closed door. "I'd love to," I said. And I swear, for just a moment, something that looked like panic flickered across her face. The next 2 weeks were strange. Emma was more attentive than she'd been in months, asking about my day, suggesting we watch movies together, even cooking dinner a few times, which she rarely did. It felt like courtship, like this early days when we were still trying to impress each other. I told myself she was just stressed about work, the partners flying in, the pressure of the dinner. I didn't think about why she might be nervous about me attending. She took me shopping, which should have been my second clue. Emma had never cared much about what I wore. I was a software developer who worked from home. My wardrobe consisted primarily of comfortable jeans and t-shirts with obscure references. But suddenly, she was insisting we go to the expensive men's store downtown. "You need a proper suit," she said, running her hand along a rack of charcoal jackets. "Something that fits well. This is important." I tried on what felt like 20 different suits while she scrutinized each one, rejecting most. Finally, she selected a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my laptop, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie the color of wine. "Perfect," she said, but she didn't quite meet my eyes when she said it in the dressing room mirror. I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who attended these kinds of events regularly. Someone polished, someone who belonged. "You look handsome," Emma said from behind me. And when I turned, she had this odd expression like she was looking at a stranger. "Thanks to you," I said, adjusting the tie. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The night of the dinner, I found myself more nervous than I'd expected. I'd met plenty of people in my life, had no problems with social situations, but something about this felt weighted. This was Emma's world, the world she'd kept separate from me for so long. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted her to be proud of me. Emma spent 2 hours getting ready. When she finally emerged from our bathroom, she looked stunning. A deep green dress that complemented her dark hair, subtle jewelry, makeup that highlighted her features without overwhelming them. She looked like someone important, someone successful, someone I barely knew. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, grabbing the car keys. "Actually," she said quickly, "I thought we'd take separate cars. I might need to stay late, do some networking, and I don't want you to have to wait around if you get tired." 7 years, and I'd learned to accept these little separations, so I agreed. Lawrence was exactly as exclusive as I'd imagined. The entrance was unmarked except for a small brass plaque. A valet took my keys with the kind of discretion that suggested he'd seen cars worth more than houses. Inside, the lighting was low and intimate, the kind of amber glow that made everyone look like they were in a film. Emma was already there, standing near the bar with a group of people in expensive suits. She saw me and waved, but something in her posture was stiff. "Everyone," she said as I approached, "this is my husband, David." My husband. She said it like an introduction to a stranger. The group turned, and I was met with polite smiles, firm handshakes, the usual pleasantries. A woman named Patricia from HR, a man named James, who was apparently Emma's direct supervisor, a younger guy named Marcus, who did something with digital marketing. And then, the international partners arrived. They entered like people who were used to being important, confident, well-dressed, speaking to each other in a mixture of languages. I caught German, Portuguese, what I thought might be Mandarin. Emma's entire demeanor changed. She straightened, her smile becoming brighter, more professional. She moved toward them like a moth to light. "Mr. Weber? Mr. Tunn? Miss Oliveira?" she said warmly. "So wonderful to see you again." They greeted her with equal warmth, and I hung back, watching. This was Emma in her element. And I realized with a strange pang that I'd never seen her like this before. Powerful, in control, completely at home. She introduced mechanically. "This is David, my husband." "Ah, the mysterious husband," Mr. Weber said with a thick German accent, shaking my hand. "Emma talks of you sometimes." "Sometimes. Not often. Sometimes we moved to our table, a long setup that could accommodate about 20 people. The partners were seated at the center with various executives and senior staff arranged around them. Emma and I were seated together, but she was immediately pulled into conversations on her other side, leaving me to make small talk with Patricia about the weather and traffic. The dinner began with champagne and appetizers that were more art than food. Conversations flowed in English, then occasionally shifted into other languages. I noticed Emma jumping in during these moments. Her German apparently fluent, her Portuguese passable. I'd known she spoke other languages. She'd mentioned it before, said it was necessary for her work, but I'd never heard her actually speak them. Never seen her face light up as she laughed at a joke in German, or watched her lean in close to whisper something in Portuguese to Miss Oliveira. It was like watching a stranger. The main course arrived, some kind of perfectly prepared fish with a sauce I couldn't pronounce. Mr. Tun began telling a story in what I now recognized as Mandarin, gesturing animatedly. The other partners laughed, and Emma smiled politely, clearly not understanding this one. Mr. Weber leaned over and translated quietly, but he was doing it in German, which Emma understood, but no one else at our end of the table did. And that's when it happened. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I turned to Mr. Weber and said in perfect German, "It sounds like an interesting story. Could you translate it for all of us?" The effect was immediate. Mr. Weber's eyebrows shot up in delighted surprise. "Schrein Deutsch." "Yeah," I replied. "Mandarin, Portuguese, Koranish. I speak German and also Mandarin, Portuguese, and a little Korean." I watched it happen in slow motion. Mr. Weber's face breaking into a huge smile, Mr. Tun leaning forward with sudden interest, Miss Oliveira's delighted laugh, and Emma. The color drained from her face so completely that for a moment I thought she might faint. Her wine glass halfway to her lips froze in midair, her eyes wide, shocked, panicked, locked onto mine. In that second, in that single moment of absolute terror in her expression, I understood. She hadn't known. In 7 years of marriage, Emma had never known that I spoke 5 languages fluently. And suddenly, I understood why I'd never been invited to these dinners before. Suddenly, I understood what she'd been saying about me when she thought I'd never understand. The conversation exploded around me. The partners were fascinated, asking me questions, wanting to know where I'd learned, how long I'd been speaking. I answered smoothly, casually, while watching Emma from the corner of my eye. She looked like she was going to be sick. "This is wonderful," Mr. Weber exclaimed, switching fully to German. "Now, Emma, you never told us your husband was multilingual." Emma's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't realize," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't realize?" Olivia laughed. "How long have you been married?" 7 years, I said, still in German, and I let the words hang there. 7 years. The partners looked confused, amused. How could you not know your own husband speaks your languages? But I knew, watching Emma's face, seeing the way her hands were trembling slightly as she set down her wine glass. I knew exactly why. And the dinner had only just begun. You know that feeling when you're watching a building collapse in slow motion? When you can see each support beam buckling, each window shattering, but you're powerless to stop it? That's what the next hour felt like. Except I wasn't powerless. I was the one holding the detonator, and I hadn't even known it until I pressed the button. Mr. Tun switched to Mandarin, speaking directly to me now, and I responded fluently. His face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Your tones are excellent," he said. "Where did you study?" I spent 2 years in Beijing after college, I replied in Mandarin, very aware that Emma was sitting beside me, frozen. Working for a tech startup, it seemed important to really learn the language, not just the textbook version. 2 years in Beijing, Mr. Tun repeated, glancing at Emma with undisguised curiosity. Emma, you never mentioned your husband lived in China. Emma's laugh was hollow, mechanical. It was before we met, she said in English, her voice tight. Ancient history. But it wasn't. We'd talked about my time in Beijing. I'd shown her photos, told her stories. She knew. She'd always known. She'd just never expected anyone else at these dinners to know. Miss Oliveira leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest in Portuguese. That's not the common language for Americans to learn. My college roommate was from São Paulo, I said, switching to Portuguese now. The language felt good in my mouth, familiar. He taught me over 4 years of late-night study sessions and too much cachaça. I'm probably better at cursing than business terminology. Mr. Oliveira laughed, a real delighted sound. The best way to learn any language, she said in Portuguese. Emma, you have been hiding a treasure from us. Hiding that word again. I watched Emma's reflection in her wine glass. She was staring at the table, her jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping beneath her skin. Her breathing was shallow, controlled. She looked like someone trying very hard not to scream. The waiters brought the next course, something delicate and expensive, but Emma barely touched hers. She was trapped. She couldn't leave without drawing attention, couldn't make a scene in front of the international partners, couldn't do anything but sit there while her carefully constructed world developed cracks. So tell me, Mr. Weber said, cutting into his food. What is it that you do, David? Emma has never really said. And there it was. The question I'd been waiting for without knowing I'd been waiting for it. I'm a software developer, I said in German. I work from home, mostly. Database architecture, some cybersecurity consulting. Ah, Mr. Weber nodded. That must be convenient. There was something in the way he said convenient, something that made the word sound smaller than it should. I glanced at Emma. She was staring at her plate like it might offer her an escape route. It is, I agreed. Flexible schedule, good pay. I enjoy the work, but not as demanding as Emma's position, I imagine, Mr. Weber continued. And now I heard it clearly, the assumption, the conclusion he'd drawn. I took a sip of my wine, let the moment breathe. Every job has its demands, I said carefully, just different kinds. Mr. Tun jumped in, oblivious to the tension building like a thunderstorm. Emma works very hard, he said in Mandarin. Always the first one in the office when we visit, last one to leave. Very dedicated. She is. I agreed in Mandarin, and I meant it. Emma was dedicated to her work. I'd never questioned that. I'd supported it, even when it meant eating dinner alone most nights, even when it meant canceled weekend plans, even when it meant 7 years of company parties I was never invited to. It must be difficult, Ms. Oliveira said, switching to English now, her voice gentle. Being married to someone so career-focused, does it ever feel like you're playing second fiddle? The question hung in the air. Everyone at our end of the table had gone quiet, listening. I could have deflected, could have said something diplomatic, something that would smooth over the moment, but something in Ms. Oliveira's tone made me pause. There was knowing in it, like she'd heard this narrative before. I've never thought of marriage as a competition, I said finally. We both contribute in our own ways. Of course, Mr. Weber said quickly, but he exchanged a glance with Mr. Tan that I wasn't supposed to see. But I did see it. I saw everything now with a clarity that was almost painful. The conversation shifted to business matters, quarterly reports, market expansions, strategy sessions. Emma dove into it with desperate energy, like she could rebuild her walls through sheer force of professional competence. She was brilliant, I had to admit. Watching her discuss international tax implications and currency fluctuations, I saw why she'd risen so high in the company. but I also noticed something else. Every time she spoke, she positioned herself as the expert, the authority. And whenever someone asked her a question about personal matters, about her life outside work, she deflected with practiced ease. "Emma, how do you balance it all?" Patricia from HR asked at one point. "Career, marriage, everything." "You make choices," Emma said smoothly. "You prioritize what matters most." What matters most? I wondered where I fell on that list. The dinner progressed through courses I couldn't have named, wines I couldn't have pronounced, and slowly, like developing a photograph in a darkroom, the picture began to emerge. I caught fragments of conversations in languages Emma thought I didn't understand. Mr. Weber to Mr. Tunn in German. Strange that she never mentioned his language skills. You'd think that would come up. Mr. Tunn to Ms. Olivia in Mandarin. He seems much more accomplished than she implied. Ms. Oliveira to someone I couldn't see in Portuguese. I thought she said he was just a hobbyist programmer. The words hit me like a physical blow. I kept my face neutral, kept nodding along to whatever conversation was happening in English, but inside something was crystallizing into sharp, cutting clarity. Emma had been lying about me. Not little white lies, not harmless exaggerations. She had been actively diminishing me, rewriting who I was, turning me into someone smaller, less significant, less worthy. Why? The answer was there, hovering just out of reach, but I couldn't quite grasp it yet. Dessert arrived, something architectural and chocolate. Emma's was untouched. She'd barely eaten anything all night. She kept checking her phone under the table, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. "So, David," James, Emma's supervisor, said from across the table. He'd been quiet most of the evening, observing. "I have to say I'm impressed. Emma always said you were more of a homebody, but you're clearly well-traveled, well-educated." Homebody, another carefully chosen word. "I enjoy being home," I said. "But I've lived in 5 countries, visited maybe 20. I just don't feel the need to broadcast it." Emma's wine glass trembled in her hand. 5 countries, Patricia exclaimed. "Where else besides China?" "Germany for a year during university," I said, watching Mr. Weber's eyebrows rise. "Brazil for 6 months on a research project. South Korea for a summer intensive language program, and a semester in France, though my French is rusty." I could feel Emma beside me, could sense her entire body going rigid. "Emma," Mr. Weber said slowly, Did you know all this?" It was the question everyone was thinking, the question that had been building all night. The absurdity of a wife not knowing her husband spoke 5 languages, had lived abroad extensively, was far more qualified and accomplished than she'd apparently let on. Emma's laugh was brittle, sharp enough to cut. "Of course I knew," she said. We don't really talk about David's past. He's very private." It was a good save, almost believable, except for the fact that I'd been answering questions about my past freely all night. "Not that private, apparently," Marcus said with a grin, and I saw Emma shoot him a look that could have frozen fire. The table settled into smaller conversations, the intensity of the moment diffusing. But I noticed the partners watching me with new interest, watching Emma with something that looked like confusion, maybe even concern. Mr. Tunn excused himself to use the restroom, and Mr. Weber turned to me, his voice low. "May I ask you something, David?" "Of course." "Your wife. She is very talented, very ambitious. But I sense," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "there is perhaps some imbalance she has portrayed to us, some narrative that does not quite match reality." I met his eyes. He was giving me an opening, an invitation to confirm what he was already suspecting. "People tell themselves stories," I said quietly. "Sometimes they believe them so deeply they forget what's true." He nodded slowly. "Yes. and sometimes these stories serve a purpose. Make them feel larger, more independent, more, he trailed off, more successful on their own merits. I finished. Precisely. We sat with that for a moment. Then Mr. Weber said, I apologize if I seemed condescending earlier. When I said your work was convenient, Emma has given us the impression that you were, how to say this, financially dependent on her. The room tilted slightly. Financially dependent. I see, I said, and my voice sounded far away. But clearly this is not the case, Mr. Weber continued. A cybersecurity consultant working from home. This is often quite lucrative. Yes, it can be, I managed. And your language skills, these are valuable in international business. You must have opportunities. I do. I did. I'd turned down several high-paying positions over the years because they would have required travel, relocation, time away from home, away from Emma, away from our marriage. Our marriage, which apparently existed as two completely different versions, the one I was living in and the one Emma had been presenting to her colleagues. Mr. Weber patted my shoulder. You seem like a good man, David. I hope Emma appreciates what she has. But the look in his eyes said he already knew the answer. Emma returned from speaking with Ms. Olivia, her face flushed. David, she said, her voice tight, I'm getting a migraine. I think I need to leave soon. A migraine? The universal escape hatch. Of course, I said. Do you want me to drive you home? No. The word came out too sharp, too desperate. She softened it with a forced smile. No, I drove separately, remember? You should stay. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Network. You're clearly good at it. The bitterness in that last sentence was palpable. Are you sure? I asked, playing the concerned husband. Positive. She gathered her purse, made her excuses to the partners who all expressed concern and sympathy. She was very good at this part. The gracious exit, the professional smile even in discomfort. She leaned down to kiss my cheek and I heard her whisper so quietly I almost missed it. We need to talk when you get home. Then she was gone, weaving through the restaurant, disappearing into the night. I sat there for a moment, processing everything. The partners had resumed their conversations, the mood lighter now, less formal. Without Emma's tension adding weight to the air, people relaxed. She works too hard, Patricia said sympathetically. She's been getting these migraines more frequently. Has she? I asked. Oh, yes. At least once a month, she has to leave early, usually right before or after big presentations. Convenient, I thought. Very convenient. The dinner continued for another hour. I spoke with the partners, answering their questions about my work, my travels, my perspectives on various international markets. They were genuinely interested, genuinely engaged. It felt good to be seen, to be heard, to be taken seriously. All things I hadn't felt in my marriage for longer than I wanted to admit. As the evening wound down and people began calling for cars, Mr. Weber pulled me aside one final time. David, he said, his voice serious. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but be careful. Careful of what? Your wife has told us many things over the years about her life, her circumstances. I am beginning to think that perhaps not all of these things were entirely accurate. He paused. In my experience, people who create elaborate fictions about their personal lives are often hiding something or compensating for something. Like what? I asked, though I was starting to form my own theories. That is for you to discover, he said. But I will say this. At our company, we value honesty, integrity. If an employee has been misrepresenting themselves, their qualifications, their situation, that is something we would need to address. The implication was clear. Emma's carefully constructed narrative wasn't just about me. It was about her, about how she'd positioned herself within the company. Thank you for the evening, I said. It was enlightening. He smiled, a sad sort of smile. I think for both of us. Yes. I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing. The pieces were there, scattered across 7 years of marriage, but I was finally starting to see how they fit together. Emma had created a version of herself for her work. The independently successful woman, unencumbered by a demanding spouse, perhaps even supporting a lesser partner. The woman who made it on her own merits, who sacrificed personal happiness for professional achievement. She'd made herself a martyr and made me her burden. All while I'd been supporting her, believing in her, staying out of her way so she could shine. The question was why? And the answer, the real answer, was waiting for me at home. Our house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, except for one light in our bedroom window. Emma's car was there, parked at an odd angle, like she'd been in a hurry. I sat in my car for a moment watching that light, and I realized something. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was curious. After 7 years of living in the story Emma had written, I finally wanted to know the truth, and I was going to get it. The walk from my car to the front door felt longer than it should have. Each step was deliberate, measured, like I was approaching something fragile that might shatter if I moved too quickly. The October air had turned cold, that sharp kind of cold that makes you aware of your breathing, of the space between heartbeats. I could see her silhouette in the bedroom window, pacing. When I opened the front door, the house was silent except for the sound of her footsteps overhead. Back and forth, back and forth. The floorboard near the dresser creaked every third pass, a rhythm I'd memorized over 7 years of falling asleep to that sound when she came to bed late. I took off my shoes, hung up the expensive suit jacket she'd bought me, the costume for a role I hadn't known I was playing. I could have gone upstairs immediately, charged into the bedroom and demanded answers. That's what happens in movies. The confrontation at fever pitch, voices raised, accusations flying. But I'd learned something about myself that night. I'd learned that I had more power in silence than I'd ever had in speech. So I went to the kitchen instead, made myself a cup of tea, chamomile from the cabinet Emma never touched because she said it smelled like hay. I sat at our kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together at that furniture store in our 2nd year of marriage, and I waited. The pacing upstairs stopped. Footsteps on the stairs, quick and light. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her green dress, but her hair was down now, her makeup slightly smudged. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable, more like the woman I'd married. "You made tea," she said. I did. Did you have a good time at the dinner?" Her voice was careful, controlled, testing. "I did," I said, taking a sip. The tea was too hot, burned my tongue slightly, but I didn't flinch. "The partners are interesting people. Very warm, very genuine." She moved into the kitchen, her hand trailing along the counter like she needed something solid to hold on to. "That's good. I'm glad your migraine," I said. "Is it better?" A flicker of something crossed her face. Guilt, maybe? "Yes. I just needed to get out of there. The lights were too bright." "The lights at Lawrence are actually quite dim," I observed. "Ambient, designed to be comfortable." She stopped moving. "What do you want me to say, David?" "I want you to say what's true," I replied calmly. "Just once. I want you to tell me the truth." "About what?" I set down my tea, looked at her directly. "About why in 7 years of marriage, you never told your colleagues that I speak 5 languages, that I've lived abroad, that I have a successful career, that I'm not some hobbyist programmer who's financially dependent on you." The color that had drained from her face at dinner didn't return now. If anything, she went paler. "I never said that," she whispered. "Mr. Weber said you did. And Miss Olivea, and the way Patricia talked about balancing everything, like you're some kind of struggling single mother instead of a married woman with a partner." I paused. "What exactly have you been telling them about me, Emma?" She pulled out a chair, sat down heavily. For a long moment, she just stared at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I told them you were simple, content with simple things, that you worked from home doing basic IT support, that you didn't really have ambitions or interests beyond video games and television. The words should have hurt more than they did, but I'd already guessed this much. Hearing it confirmed was almost a relief. Why? I asked. Because she looked up at me and there were tears in her eyes now. Because it was easier. Easier than what? Easier than explaining why I married you. The words exploded out of her, sharp and jagged. She immediately looked shocked that she'd said them, her hand flying to her mouth like she could stuff them back in. But they were out now, hanging in the air between us like smoke. I see, I said quietly. No, you don't. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in thin black rivers. You don't understand. When I started at the firm, I was nobody. The girl from the state school, the scholarship kid, the one who had to work twice as hard as everyone else just to be considered half as good. Everyone else had connections, legacy admissions, family, money. I had nothing. You had talent, I said. You had intelligence. You earned your place there. Did I? She laughed, bitter and sharp. Or did I marry it? The room went very still. What does that mean? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind like ice crystals, cold and intricate and cutting. Emma wiped at her face, smearing her makeup further. We met at that conference, remember? You were there presenting on database security, and I was just starting out in international finance. You were so smart, so worldly, speaking all those languages, talking about living in Beijing and Berlin like it was nothing. And I thought she trailed off, but I needed her to finish, needed to hear her say it. You thought what? I thought you could help me, she said finally. I thought having a husband like you, educated, multilingual, connected, I thought it would give me legitimacy, make me belong in those rooms where everyone else had pedigree. I absorbed this slowly, like my body was processing poison. So you married me for my resume? No. She reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. No, I loved you. I did. I do. But yes. Okay, yes. Part of it was thinking that you would be an asset, that we could be a power couple, that your connections and languages and experience would open doors for both of us. But that's not what happened, I said. She shook her head miserably. The first company party I brought you to, remember? It was just a few months after we got married, that reception at the Hilton. I remembered I'd met her colleagues, had conversations in German and Portuguese with some international clients who were there. I'd thought it went well. Emma had been quiet on the drive home, but I'd assumed she was just tired. You were so good, Emma said, her voice breaking. So charming and knowledgeable and impressive. And everyone loved you. They spent the whole night talking to you, asking you questions, wanting to know about your experiences. And I stood there watching my husband be more interesting than I was at my own company party. Understanding dawned, cold and complete. So you stopped bringing me? I said. I told myself it was because you'd be bored, because you didn't like those events. But really, she drew a shaky breath. Really? I couldn't stand being overshadowed. I couldn't stand watching people be more impressed with my husband than with me. I'd worked so hard to build my reputation, and you could just walk into a room and command it without even trying. So, you rewrote me, I said. Made me smaller, less threatening. I told myself I was protecting you, Emma said quickly. That you wouldn't want to be dragged to these boring corporate events anyway, that you preferred staying home. And then the lie just grew. Every time someone asked about you, I made you a little bit simpler, a little bit less, until you became this fiction, the simple homebody husband who was content to let me have the spotlight. I thought about 7 years of staying home while she went to parties. 7 years of believing her when she said I'd be bored, that it was just work talk, that I was lucky to skip. 7 years of supporting her career while she turned me into a character in a story she was telling herself and everyone else. And the financial dependency thing, I asked, where did that come from? She looked away. When I got promoted to senior associate, there was talk about whether I deserved it. Some people said I was too young, too inexperienced. So I may have implied that I had additional responsibilities at home, that I was supporting you financially because your work was inconsistent. My work has never been inconsistent, I said flatly. I make more than you do. I know. I've been paying more than half our mortgage for 6 years. I know. I paid for your car. I paid for that vacation to Hawaii you told everyone you'd saved up for. I know. She was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. I know. Okay. I know what you've done, what you've contributed. But I couldn't admit that at work, because then the whole narrative falls apart, doesn't it? The independent woman who made it on her own becomes the woman who married well and rode her husband's coattails. Except you're the one who's been riding coattails, I said, and my voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. You've been using my actual accomplishments to justify your position while simultaneously erasing me to take credit for them. You wanted the legitimacy I brought without acknowledging that I brought it. She flinched like I'd hit her. We sat in silence for a long moment. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Normal sounds in a house that no longer felt normal. What happens now? Emma asked finally, her voice small. It was a good question. What did happen now? I'd uncovered the lie, confronted the liar. But the foundation of our marriage had been built on a fiction. Could you renovate a house when the ground beneath it was quicksand? I need to know something, I said. Tonight. Why did you finally invite me after 7 years? Why now? Emma's face crumpled. They insisted. The managing partners, they said they wanted to meet everyone's spouses, make it more personal. I tried to get out of it, said you were traveling for work, that you were sick, every excuse I could think of, but Mr. Weber said it was important that they were making decisions about who to promote to partner. And they wanted to see the whole person, including their family life. So you had no choice, I said. I had no choice. She agreed. And I thought maybe it would be okay. Maybe you'd just make small talk in English, eat dinner, and that would be it. I didn't know you'd just announce that you speak all those languages. Why did you do that, David? Why didn't you just stay quiet? The question hung between us, and I realized she genuinely didn't understand. She'd been married to me for 7 years, and she didn't know me at all. Because someone was telling a story in Mandarin, I said simply, and I wanted to hear it. I didn't think about whether it would expose your lies. I just participated in a conversation like a normal person at a dinner party. She started crying harder. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the evening was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. I'm going to sleep in the guest room, I said. David, please. I need time, Emma. I need to think about what this means, what we are. We're married, she said desperately. We're husband and wife. We made vows. You made vows, I corrected. I don't know what you made. A strategic partnership, a convenient cover story. I left her crying at the kitchen table and climbed the stairs to the guest room. It was smaller than our bedroom, with a single window that looked out onto the street. I'd set it up as an office space, but there was a daybed in the corner for when her parents visited. I lay down, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Wilhelm Weber. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted you to have my contact information. If you need anything, advice, references, even just someone to talk to, please don't hesitate. You impressed us all tonight. Whatever happens, you deserve to know your worth. I read it 3 times. Then I saved the number and turned off my phone. Through the wall, I could hear Emma moving around in our bedroom, the water running, her crying, muffled but persistent, the sound of her getting into bed alone. 7 years, and this was the first night we'd spent apart in our own house. I should have felt angry, betrayed, devastated. Instead, I felt something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. For 7 years, I'd been living in Emma's story, playing the role she'd assigned me without knowing it. I'd made myself smaller to fit into her narrative, turned down opportunities so I wouldn't threaten her version of our life. But tonight, I'd stepped out of the story. I'd been myself, fully, completely, unapologetically myself. And the world hadn't ended. In fact, people had responded to the real me with interest, respect, even admiration. The real me had value. The question was, did Emma actually want the real me, or did she only want the fiction she'd created? I fell asleep thinking about that question. And when I dreamed of conversations in languages Emma would never bother to learn, in countries she'd never ask me about, with people who saw me for who I actually was. When I woke up the next morning to pale sunlight filtering through the guest room window, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. 1, Emma's lies went deeper than just rewriting my biography. 2, I deserve better than a marriage built on shame and diminishment. And 3, I was going to find out exactly what else she'd been hiding. Because if she had lied about this, about something so fundamental as who her husband was, what else had she lied about? The answer was waiting in her office, in her emails, in the 7 years of carefully constructed fiction. And I was going to find it. There's a particular kind of quiet that exists in a house the morning after everything changes. It's not peaceful. It's the quiet of held breath, of waiting, of 2 people moving through the same space while occupying completely different realities. I heard Emma wake up around 6, heard the shower run for longer than usual, heard her moving through the bedroom with careful, deliberate steps like she was trying not to wake me, not knowing I'd been awake for hours. I stayed in the guest room until I heard her car pull out of the driveway. She left early, earlier than normal, and I wondered if she was avoiding me or running to work to control whatever damage had been done at dinner. Probably both. When I finally went downstairs, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Her handwriting, usually so precise, was shaky. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am. We need to talk more. When you're ready. I love you. E. I folded the note in half, then quarters, then tucked it into my pocket. Physical evidence, a tangible piece of this unraveling. I made coffee, strong, black, the way I liked it, but never made any more because Emma preferred it light and sweet and said the smell of dark roast gave her headaches. Another small accommodation I'd made without thinking. Another tiny way I'd reduced myself to fit into her preferred narrative. The house felt different in her absence, larger somehow, like I was seeing it for the first time. Our home office was on the 2nd floor, a converted bedroom with 2 desks facing opposite walls. Mine was organized chaos. Multiple monitors, mechanical keyboard, a whiteboard covered in code snippets, and database diagrams. Hers was pristine, minimalist, everything in its place. I'd respected that space for 7 years. Her desk was her domain, her papers, her business. I'd never snooped, never questioned, never doubted. But trust, once broken, doesn't just crack. It shatters. And through the fragments you start seeing things you'd missed before. I sat down at her desk. Her computer was locked, password protected. I didn't know it, had never needed to. But I knew Emma. I knew how her mind worked, how she organized information. I tried her birthday wrong, my birthday wrong, our anniversary wrong. Then, on impulse, I tried the date she got her first big promotion. The one she'd told me about with such pride. The one that had made her cry happy tears when she came home. The computer unlocked. Her desktop was as organized as her physical desk. Folders labeled by client, by project, by year. Everything compartmentalized, everything in its place. I opened her email. If you've ever looked through someone's private correspondence, knowing you'll find things you don't want to see, you know the feeling. Your mouse hovers, your finger hesitates on the trackpad. There's still time to close it, to walk away, to preserve the possibility that maybe it's not as bad as you think. But I'd spent 7 years in carefully maintained ignorance. I was done with maybe. I searched for my name, David. 247 results. I started reading. The earliest emails were from 6 years ago, shortly after that first company party she'd mentioned, in exchange with someone named Michelle from HR. Michelle, thanks for asking about David. Yes, he's doing well. He works from home, which is perfect for us since my schedule is so demanding. He's very low maintenance, thankfully. More of a homebody, really content with his simple routine. It makes it easier for me to focus on my career without having to worry about him feeling neglected. Some women have husbands who demand attention and time. I'm lucky mine doesn't need that. Low maintenance, simple routine. Lucky. I felt sick. I kept reading an email to her supervisor from 4 years ago when she was being considered for senior associate. James, regarding the partnership track discussion, I wanted to address any concerns about my personal obligations. While I am married, my husband's work situation is quite flexible and undemanding. He does basic freelance IT work from home, nothing that requires significant time or generates substantial income. I'm effectively the primary breadwinner, which means I can dedicate myself fully to the firm without the constraints many of my peers face. I don't have to negotiate around a spouse's career demands or relocate concerns. Basic freelance I work, nothing substantial. I remembered that year I'd turned down a 6-figure position at a cybersecurity firm in San Francisco because Emma had said she loved our house, our life, our city. She'd cried when I told her I'd declined the offer, said she didn't want me to sacrifice my happiness for her career. Except it hadn't been a sacrifice. It had been strategic. Keep me in place, keep me small. Keep me from becoming a competing narrative. More emails. A thread with other female associates. How do you all balance marriage and career? I feel like I'm drowning sometimes. Emma's response. Honestly, I think it helps that my husband has limited ambition. He's happy in his little bubble, which means I don't have to feel guilty about my schedule. Some of you have partners who are equally ambitious. That must be so much harder to navigate. Little bubble. Another email. This one to Ms. Olivea from 2 years ago. Claudia, thank you for your mentorship. You asked me once how I managed to be so focused, so undistracted by personal life. The truth is, I chose a partner who wouldn't compete with my career. My husband is sweet, supportive, but not driven. I suppose he doesn't understand the stakes of what we do, which means he doesn't create additional pressure. It's unconventional maybe, but it works. I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking. I'd been reduced to an adjective. Sweet, like a pet, like something harmless and simple that didn't require real engagement. But I kept going because I needed to know, needed to see the full picture. An email from 8 months ago to the entire senior associate cohort for those asking about my upcoming presentation to the partners. Yes, I'm nervous. But I think I have a strong case. I've sacrificed a lot for this firm. I've put career ahead of starting a family, ahead of a conventional marriage, ahead of personal fulfillment. In many ways, my husband is basically self-sufficient, which has allowed me to say yes to every opportunity, every late night, every weekend project. I think that dedication should count for something. Sacrificed. Like being married to me was a burden she'd nobly shouldered. I found emails about promotions she'd received, bonuses she'd earned. In everyone. When discussing her qualifications, she found ways to mention her unusual home situation, or her undemanding spouse, or her freedom from typical marital constraints. She'd weaponized me, turned my absence from her work life into proof of her dedication, made my invisibility evidence of her sacrifice. And then I found something else. Something that made all the previous discoveries feel like preparation for a deeper wound. A folder labeled Partnership Application. I opened it. Inside were documents for her upcoming review for junior partner, a position she'd never mentioned to me. Cover letters, recommendation requests, financial disclosures, and a personal statement. I opened it. My journey to this firm has been unconventional. Unlike many of my peers, I didn't come from privilege or legacy. I've built everything myself, often at personal cost. 7 years ago, I made what many would consider an unusual choice. I married someone whose ambitions and capabilities were fundamentally different from my own. While my husband is a kind man, his lack of professional drive or worldly engagement has meant that I've had to be the sole architect of our financial future and social standing. This hasn't been easy. I've attended every firm event alone, explaining to clients and partners why my spouse prefers to stay home. I've shouldered the financial burden of our household, our mortgage, our lifestyle. I've sacrificed the kind of partnership many of my female colleagues enjoy, one where both spouses challenge and support each other professionally. But this sacrifice has also been my strength. It's taught me self-reliance. It's freed me from the complications that dual career marriages create. It's allowed me to say yes to every opportunity without negotiation or compromise. I've proven that I can succeed without the advantages others take for granted. I've done it alone in every way that matters, and I'm ready to continue doing so as a junior partner of this firm. I read it 3 times. Each time it felt like watching a stranger describe a life I'd never lived. I'd been erased completely. And in my place, Emma had constructed a martyr narrative. The successful woman burdened by her lesser husband succeeding despite him rather than with him. The date on the document was last week. She'd written this last week while I was downstairs making dinner, while I was asking about her day, while I was living in a marriage I thought was real. I sat back in her chair staring at the screen. This wasn't just about ego. This wasn't just about her not wanting to be overshadowed. This was calculated, systematic. She'd built an entire professional identity on the fiction of my inadequacy, and she'd done it so thoroughly that even her personal statement, the most important document of her career, was structured around the lie of who I was, or rather, who I wasn't. My phone rang, Mr. Weber's number. I answered without thinking. "Hello, David. Good morning. I hope I'm not disturbing you." His German accent was warm, familiar. "Not at all. I wanted to follow up on last night. There's been some discussion among the partners this morning about Emma's application for junior partner." My stomach dropped. "Oh yes. You see, we do background checks as part of the promotion process, standard procedure, financial disclosures, reference verification, that sort of thing." He paused. "And we've discovered some inconsistencies." I said nothing, waited. "Emma's financial disclosure claims she is the primary income source for your household, but our investigator noted that the mortgage on your home is primarily paid from an account in your name, as is the vehicle registration for her car, as are several other significant expenses." I see I managed. "David, I'm going to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. Has Emma been truthful about your financial situation?" I looked at the personal statement still glowing on the screen. "I've shouldered the financial burden of our household." "No," I said. "She hasn't." I thought not. He sighed. "This is complicated. We can't have a junior partner whose application is built on false information. It calls into question her integrity, her judgment." "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends. We need to understand the full scope of the misrepresentation, whether it's limited to personal matters or if it extends to her professional representations as well. He paused. Would you be willing to meet with me and the other managing partners to discuss the situation? You want me to testify against my wife? I said flatly. I want the truth, he corrected gently. Whatever that truth is. If Emma has been honest in her professional capacity and only embellished her personal situation, that's one thing. But if this pattern of misrepresentation is broader, we need to know. I thought about the emails, the years of lies, the systematic eraser of who I actually was. When? I asked. Today, if possible? This afternoon? We're meeting anyway to discuss partnership decisions. Your perspective would be valuable. I'll be there. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of Emma's office, surrounded by her carefully organized lies. I could stop this. I could call him back, say I'd reconsidered protect Emma's career. I could be the sweet, supportive, undemanding husband she'd described. I could make myself small enough to fit back into her narrative. But that would require me to keep lying too, to participate in my own eraser. And I was done being erased. I forwarded myself the personal statement, took screenshots of key emails, not all of them. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was just documenting the truth. Then I closed her computer, locked it again with her promotion date, and left the office. I had 4 hours before the meeting with the partners. 4 hours to decide exactly how much truth I was willing to tell. I went back downstairs, poured another cup of coffee, and sat in the living room. Our living room, with furniture we'd chosen together, art I'd picked out, books I'd bought. My phone buzzed. Emma, can we please talk tonight? I know I hurt you. I know I need to fix this. Please, David, let me fix this. I stared at the message for a long time. Fix this, like it was a broken appliance. A glitch in the system, something that could be repaired with the right words, the right apology. That you can't fix a foundation built on lies. You can only tear it down and start over. I didn't respond. Instead, I went upstairs, took a shower, and put on one of my own suits. Not the one Emma had bought me, but one I'd purchased years ago for a conference I'd spoken at. It still fit perfectly. I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. I saw someone who'd been convinced he was less than he was, someone who'd accepted diminishment as love, someone who'd spent 7 years apologizing for taking up space in his own life. But I also saw someone else emerging, someone who spoke 5 languages, someone who'd lived in 5 countries, someone who built complex security systems and consulted for international clients, someone with worth, someone who deserved to be seen. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. It was time for the managing partners to see the whole picture. And this time, I'd be the one telling the story. The headquarters of Whitmore and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. I'd driven past it hundreds of times, never once going inside. Emma's world, Emma's territory. A space I'd been systematically excluded from until now. The elevator moved smoothly upward, and I watched the city shrink below me through the glass walls. 32 floors. I felt like I was ascending toward something inevitable, like the building itself was pulling me toward a confrontation 7 years in the making. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that screamed quiet money. Marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than my car, a receptionist who looked like she'd been hired for her ability to make visitors feel simultaneously welcome and inadequate. David Chen, I said. I have a meeting with Mr. Weber. Her fingers flew across her keyboard. Of course, Mr. Chen. They're expecting you in the executive conference room, 10th door on your right. They're expecting you. I wondered if Emma knew I was coming, if she was somewhere in this building working at her desk, completely unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The conference room was all windows and polished wood, a table that could seat 20, though only 4 chairs were occupied. Mr. Weber, Ms. Oliveira, Mr. Tan, and a woman I didn't recognize. Severe suit, graying hair pulled back tight, eyes that missed nothing. David. Mr. Weber stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." "Please, sit. This is Margaret Shu, our head of HR and Ethics Compliance." Ethics Compliance. The words hung in the air like a warning. I shook hands around the table, then sat. Through the windows behind them, I could see the entire city spread out like a circuit board, all connection and complexity. Somewhere down there was the house Emma and I shared from up here. It was invisible. "Can we get you anything?" Miss Olivia asked. "Coffee, water. Water would be good, thank you." She poured from a crystal pitcher. The glass she handed me probably costs more than our monthly utilities. "David," Mr. Weber began, folding his hands on the table. "First, let me say that this is an unusual situation. We don't typically involve spouses in personnel matters, but the discrepancies we've discovered in Emma's partnership application are significant enough that we need clarity." "I understand," I said. Margaret Shu leaned forward. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about what this is and isn't. This isn't a legal proceeding. You're not under oath, but we are asking you to be honest with us about your marriage and your wife's representations of that marriage. Do you understand?" "I do." "And you're willing to speak candidly?" I thought about the emails, the personal statement. 7 years of being rewritten? "Yes," I said. Mr. Weber opened a folder. "Let's start with the financial disclosures. Emma's application states that she is the primary breadwinner in your household, contributing approximately 75% of your combined income. Is this accurate?" "No," I said. "It's not even close." I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app I'd prepared. "I contribute roughly 60% of our household income. I've paid the majority of our mortgage since we refinanced 4 years ago. I purchased Emma's vehicle outright. I pay for our homeowner's insurance, most of our utilities, and the property taxes." I turned the phone so they could see the transaction history. Margaret Sue took it, her eyes scanning the screen with professional precision. "These are substantial contributions," she said quietly. "I work as a cybersecurity consultant," I explained. "I have contracts with 3 major firms and several smaller clients. My income varies, but averages between $200,000 and $250,000 annually." Mr. Tun's eyebrows rose, and "Emma told us you did." "How did she phrase it?" "Basic freelance IT work." "She did," I confirmed. Ms. Oliveira exchanged a glance with Mr. Weber. "Why would she misrepresent this?" "Because the truth didn't serve her narrative." I said the truth was that she married someone whose career was as successful as hers. Someone who could have been a partner in her professional life instead of a footnote. I pulled out my laptop, then opened the screenshots I'd prepared. "With your permission, I'd like to show you something." Margaret Shu nodded. I projected Emma's personal statement onto the conference room screen. The words glowed against the white wall. Each sentence a small act of eraser. I married someone whose ambitions and capabilities were fundamentally different from my own. I watched them read it, watched their expression shift from curiosity to concern to something that looked like anger. This is from her partnership application. Margaret Shu asked, her voice tight. "Yes, written last week. And these characterizations of you? They're false." "Demonstrably," I said. I pulled up another document. This is my CV. 5 languages, 7 years of international consulting, publications in 3 major cybersecurity journals, a master's degree from MIT. The silence in the room was profound. "She told us you were a homebody," Mr. Tun said slowly, "someone who preferred staying out of social situations." "I've lived in 5 countries," I replied. "I speak 5 languages fluently. I've presented at conferences on 3 continents. Does that sound like someone who avoids social situations?" Mr. Weber leaned back in his chair. Why didn't you correct these misrepresentations? Surely over 7 years there must have been opportunities. I didn't know about them, I said simply. Emma kept her work life completely separate from our home life until last night. I had never attended a single company event. I didn't know what she was telling you about me. I trusted her. The weight of that last sentence settled over the table. Show them the emails, Ms. Olivia said quietly. I looked at her, startled. How did you? Because I know Emma, she said, and I'm starting to understand the scope of what she's done. Show them. I hesitated. This felt like crossing a line, like violating something sacred about marriage. But then I thought about the personal statement about being called a burden Emma had nobly shouldered, and the hesitation evaporated. I pulled up the email to Michelle from HR, read it aloud. He's very low maintenance, thankfully, more of a homebody, really content with his simple routine than the one to her supervisor. Basic freelance IT work from home, nothing that requires significant time or generates substantial income. With each email, I watched their faces harden. How many of these are there? Margaret Hushu asked. Hundreds, I said, spanning 6 years. Every time someone asked about me, she diminished me, made me smaller, simpler, less significant. And she used that diminishment to position herself as someone who'd sacrificed personal fulfillment for professional achievement. Mr. Weber shook his head slowly. This is worse than I thought. There's more, Margaret Hsu said, opening her own laptop. We've been conducting our own investigation since last night. After David's revelation at dinner, we started looking more closely at Emma's representations throughout her time here. She turned her screen so we could all see a spreadsheet, rows and rows of data. Emma's client reports, Margaret continued. We noticed some patterns. Client meetings she claimed to have conducted alone were actually attended by multiple associates. Projects she claimed to have led were collaborative efforts. Nothing technically fraudulent. The work was done. The clients were served. But the credit was disproportionately claimed. She's been building a false portfolio, Ms. Olivia said, and she sounded sad, making herself look more accomplished than she actually is. Not necessarily more accomplished, Mr. Ton corrected. Emma is talented, very talented. But she's been claiming sole credit for team successes, and when questioned, she's used her difficult personal situation as justification for why she needed to stand out. Margaret Hsu pulled up another document. 3 months ago, Emma applied for a major client account, the Hoffman Group, out of Munich. In her pitch, she emphasized her ability to handle German language negotiations independently. She got the account. She speaks German, I said. Conversationally, at least. But you speak it fluently, Mr. Weber said. Native level from what I witnessed last night. I nodded slowly, seeing where this was going. We reviewed the Hoffman account communications, Margaret continued. Emma's German is adequate for basic business discussions, but some of the more complex negotiations, the terminology she used, the cultural nuances, it was beyond her level. She pulled up an email chain. I read it and my blood went cold. The phrasing, the sentence structure, the specific terms for financial instruments that had no direct English translation. I'd helped her with these emails 3 months ago when she'd come to me saying she was struggling with some German terminology for a hypothetical client scenario. She'd asked me to review her translations, help her phrase things correctly. I'd done it because I loved her, because supporting your spouse's career is what you do. I hadn't realized I was ghostwriting her professional correspondence. You wrote these. Ms. Oliveira said it wasn't a question. I helped her with the German. I admitted she said it was for practice. I didn't know it was for an actual client. So Emma has been using your language skills to secure and manage accounts. Margaret Hsu said, making notes while simultaneously claiming you have no professional capabilities worth mentioning. The irony was so sharp it could cut. Mr. Ton pulled up another file. We found similar patterns with her Portuguese correspondence and some Mandarin translations that seemed sophisticated for her level. She's been using me, I said quietly, using my skills when she needed them, then hiding my existence when it served her narrative. It's worse than that, Mr. Weber said grimly. She's been committing fraud. Not legally, perhaps. You helped her willingly, but ethically, professionally, she's been misrepresenting her capabilities to clients and to this firm. The room went quiet. Through the windows, I could see a plane drawing a white line across the blue sky. People up there, flying somewhere, completely unaware of the lives unraveling 32 floors below. What happens now? I asked. Margaret Shue closed her laptop. That depends on several factors. The scope of the misrepresentation, whether clients have been harmed, whether Emma is willing to acknowledge and correct her behavior. You're going to confront her, I said. We have to, Mr. Weber replied. A partnership is built on trust, on integrity. We can't promote someone whose entire application is built on fabrications. She'll be devastated, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. Despite everything, despite the lies and the eraser and the systematic diminishment, I didn't want to see Emma destroyed. I just wanted to be seen. She should have thought of that before she built a career on falsified credentials, Miss Oliveira said. But her voice was gentle. David, you understand that you're not responsible for this. Her choices were her own. I know, I said. But she's still my wife. Is she? Margaret Shue asked. I mean that genuinely. After everything you've learned, everything she's done, is she still your wife in any meaningful sense? I didn't have an answer for. And that, Mr. Weber stood, walked to the window. We'll need to meet with Emma this afternoon. Would you be willing to stay to confront her with this information directly? The thought made my stomach churn, but I nodded. Yes, you don't have to, Ms. Oliveira said quickly. We can handle this without you. No, I said firmly. I've spent 7 years being handled, being managed, being kept out of rooms where decisions about my own life were being made. I'm done with that. If you're going to confront Emma about her lies, I'm going to be there. They exchanged glances. Finally, Margaret Shue nodded. All right. We'll call her up at 2 o'clock. Until then, you're welcome to wait here, or there's a lounge down the hall. I'd like to see her office, I said suddenly. Another exchange of glances. I'm not going to touch anything, I assured them. I've never seen where she works, where she spent the majority of her waking hours for 7 years. I'd like to see it. Mr. Weber studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Floor 30, corner office. Her name is on the door. I took the elevator down 2 floors. The 30th floor was quieter than the executive level. More open plan with individual offices lining the perimeter. I found Emma's name on a door halfway down. Emma Chen, Senior Associate. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The office was exactly what I would have expected. Minimalist, professional, expensive art on the walls, abstract pieces that meant nothing and everything. A desk with a single photo frame. I picked it up. It was us, our wedding day. Emma and White, me and a tux, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. We looked happy. We looked like people who knew each other. I set it down face down on the desk. On her bookshelf were legal texts, financial journals, and a few personal items. A snow globe from a trip we'd taken to Vermont. A small ceramic bowl I'd made in a pottery glass, lopsided and ugly, but she'd insisted on keeping it. Evidence of a life together, a real marriage, real affection, real history. But also pinned to a corkboard above her desk, a list. Goals for the year. Make junior partner. Secure Hoffman account. Position for senior partner track. Establish reputation as top-tier international consultant. No mention of marriage. No mention of me. No mention of anything outside this office, this career, this singular focus. I sat in her chair, looked at the view she saw every day. The city spread below, full of possibility and ambition and people climbing toward something. Had she ever looked at this view and thought of me, of our home, of the life we were supposedly building together? Or had I only ever been a tool, a resource to be used when convenient, hidden when inconvenient, rewritten when necessary? My phone buzzed. "Emma, where are you? You're not answering at home. I'm worried. Please talk to me." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "I'm at your office, your real office, the one I was never invited to see. I'm meeting with the managing partners at 2. You should probably be here." I watched the typing indicator appear, disappear, appear again, finally. "What? Why, David? What's going on?" "The truth," I replied. "It's finally coming out. All of it." I turned off my phone and sat in her chair in her office in the world she'd built without me. In 2 hours, that world was going to come crashing down, and I was going to watch it happen. At 1:47 p.m., I heard her heels in the hallway. Fast, sharp clicks against marble tile. The sound of someone running late or running scared. I was back in the executive conference room, seated at the long table with the managing partners arrayed around me like a tribunal, not beside them. That would have felt wrong. Performative, but not across from them either, not in the position where Emma would sit. I'd chosen a seat at the corner, diagonal, observer and participant both. The door opened. Emma stopped in the doorway, her eyes scanning the room. When she saw me, the color drained from her face so completely I thought she might collapse. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. "David," she breathed. "What?" "Please come in, Emma." Margaret Shue said, her voice professionally neutral. "Close the door behind you." Emma did, but her eyes never left mine. I watched her calculate, watched her mind racing through possibilities, trying to understand how her carefully separated worlds had collided. She looked different here, more polished, more armored. Her hair was pulled back severely, her suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. She wore her work face, the confident, controlled professional I'd glimpsed at dinner. But underneath, I could see the cracks forming. "Sit down, Emma," Mr. Verweber said. She moved to the chair across from us, sat with perfect posture. Her hands were shaking, so she folded them in her lap where we couldn't see. "I don't understand what's happening," she said, and her voice had that careful quality people use when they already know exactly what's happening but are hoping they're wrong. Margaret Shue slid a folder across the table. "We've been reviewing your partnership application." Emma opened it. I watched her eyes scan the first page. Her personal statement, the one about her sacrifices, her burdensome marriage, her singular achievement. "I don't," she started. "We've also been reviewing your financial disclosures," Margaret continued, "and your client correspondence and having conversations with people close to you." Emma's eyes flicked to me. In them, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just fear. Betrayal. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong by being here. "David volunteered to meet with us," Mr. Weber said, watching her carefully, "to help us understand some discrepancies." "Discrepancies," Emma repeated, her voice hollow. Ms. Olivia leaned forward. "Emma, in your personal statement, you claim to be the primary breadwinner in your household. You state that your husband does basic freelance IT work that generates minimal income. Is this accurate?" Silence. Emma was staring at the table, her jaw clenched. Emma Margaret Shue prompted, "We need you to answer." I may have simplified." "David has provided us with financial records," Mr. Weber interrupted. "Bank statements, tax returns. He contributes 60% of your household income. He pays your mortgage. He bought your car. This isn't simplification, Emma. This is fabrication." Emma's eyes squeezed shut. "It's more complicated than it looks on paper." "Then explain it to us," Margaret said. "Help us understand why you would misrepresent your financial situation on an application for partnership." "Because," Emma's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again, because it sounded better, more impressive. The narrative of the woman who built everything herself, who sacrificed and struggled. It's more compelling than woman with successful husband applies for promotion. The bluntness of it hung in the air. So you lied, Mr. Tunn said simply. I positioned things favorably, Emma countered, and I heard some of her professional confidence returning. This was familiar ground for her. Spin, narrative, control, persuasion. Everyone does it on applications. Everyone emphasizes their strengths and downplays their advantages. There's a difference between emphasis and fiction, Margaret Chu said coldly. You didn't downplay an advantage. You invented a disadvantage. You turned your spouse into a liability on paper to make yourself look more accomplished. Emma flinched. Ms. Oliveira pulled up her laptop, turned it to show the screen. Let's talk about the Hoffman Group account. I watched Emma's face go gray. You secured this account by claiming fluency in German, native-level proficiency, according to your pitch. I speak German, Emma said defensively. You speak your conversational German, Miss Oliveira corrected. B2 level, maybe? But the correspondence with Hoffman, the technical financial terminology, the complex negotiations, that's C2 level, native speaker level. She pulled up an email chain. I recognized it immediately, the one I'd helped translate 3 months ago. David wrote these, Ms. Oliveira said flatly. Didn't he? Emma's silence was answer enough. You used your husband's language skills to secure and maintain a client account, Margaret Chu said, making notes on her tablet while simultaneously claiming he had no professional capabilities. Does that strike you as ethical, Emma? I didn't force him to help me, Emma said, and there was an edge of desperation in her voice now. He offered. He wanted to support my career. Because that's what spouses do, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken since Emma entered the room. She looked at me and I saw tears forming in her eyes. David, please. They asked me what I thought I was helping you with. I continued, my voice steady. I told them you said it was a hypothetical scenario. Practice translations. I had no idea you were using my work for actual client communications. You never asked. Why would I? My voice hardened. I trusted you, Emma. I trusted that when you asked for help, you were being honest about why you needed it. Mr. Weber pulled out another document. Let's discuss the company events. Emma, in 7 years of marriage, you've never brought David to a single firm function. Why? Emma's mouth opened, closed. He doesn't enjoy those kinds of events. That's not true, I said. I was never invited. David, Mr. Weber said, looking at me in our phone conversation this morning. You mentioned you've presented at international conferences, given keynote speeches. You've attended hundreds of professional events. Does it seem plausible that you would find our company parties too uncomfortable to attend? No, I said simply. All eyes turned back to Emma. I thought she started, then stopped. Tried again. I thought it would be easier if I kept work and home separate. Easier for whom? Ms. Oliveira asked. For everyone, Emma's voice rose. For David, who didn't have to waste his evenings making small talk with people he didn't know. For me, who didn't have to explain or introduce or share the spotlight. I finished quietly. The conference room went silent. Emma stared at me. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. Be honest, Emma, for once. The real reason you never brought me to these events. What was it? I watched her struggle, watched her try to find a version of the truth that wouldn't condemn her. But we were past that now. Past the careful language and strategic omissions. Because you're better at this than I am, she said finally, and her voice broke. Because you walk into a room and people gravitate to you. Because you speak 5 languages and you've lived everywhere and you have stories and experiences that make mine look small. Because at that first party we went to together, everyone wanted to talk to you instead of me, and I couldn't stand it. There it was, the truth, raw and ugly and finally spoken aloud. So you erased me, I said. I protected myself, she countered, by making me smaller. By creating space for myself to succeed. Her voice was sharp now, defensive. Do you know what it's like to be the state school scholarship kid in a firm full of legacy Ivy Leaguers? To always be playing catch-up, always feeling like you don't quite belong? I needed to stand out, David. I needed to be exceptional. And I couldn't do that if everyone was focused on my impressive husband instead of me. Mr. Tunn shook his head slowly. So you invented a different husband, one who made you look more impressive by comparison. Emma's face crumpled. I didn't invent him. I just emphasized certain aspects. David does work from home. He is quiet and private. He does prefer staying in. I just made it sound more significant than it was. You told people I was financially dependent on you, I said, and my voice was hard now. You told them my work was basic and undemanding. You called my life a simple routine. You turned 7 years of partnership into a burden you were nobly carrying. I never meant it that way. Then how did you mean it? I demanded. Explain to me how calling my career basic freelance IT work was anything other than a deliberate lie. It was strategy, Emma shouted, and then seemed shocked by her own volume. She lowered her voice. It was strategy. In this business, you need a narrative, a story people can understand and remember. The successful woman who did it alone, who overcame obstacles, who sacrificed. That's a compelling story. That's a story that gets you promoted. And the truth, Miss Oliveira asked? The truth that you have a successful, supportive, accomplished partner? Why wasn't that a good story? Because it makes me look lucky instead of capable, Emma said bitterly. Because people assume that if you have advantages, you haven't really earned your success. I've watched it happen to other women in this firm. They marry well, and suddenly every achievement is questioned. Every promotion is attributed to having a supportive partner or family wealth or connections. I didn't want that. I wanted people to know I did this myself. But you didn't do it yourself. Margaret Hsu said you used David's skills for client work. You used his income to present yourself as financially sacrificial. You used his absence to create a narrative of dedication. You've been using him all along, Emma, just not in the way you wanted anyone to know. The truth of it settled over the room like ash. Emma was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in the same black rivulet I'd seen last night. I love him, she said desperately. I know it doesn't look like it. I know I've made terrible choices, but I do love him. Did you ever think to ask what I wanted? I asked quietly. Did you ever consider that maybe I would have wanted to be part of your professional life? That maybe being introduced as your accomplished husband would have been better than being hidden away like something shameful? I thought I was protecting you, Emma said, but her voice was weak from the judgment, the comparisons, the way people measure and categorize. You were protecting yourself, I corrected, and you sacrificed me to do it. Mr. Weber stood, walked to the window. The afternoon light cast long shadows across the conference table. Emma, this partnership was going to be a significant step in your career, a validation of 7 years of work, but we can't extend that offer knowing that your application was built on false pretenses. Emma's head snapped up. What? Your partnership is being declined, Margaret Hsu said formally, effective immediately. No, Emma's voice was small, shocked. No, you can't. We can, Mr. Weber said, turning back to face her. We have a duty to our clients, our firm, and our other partners. We cannot promote someone whose integrity is compromised. But the work I've done, Emma started desperately. The clients I've brought in, the accounts I've managed, the revenue I've generated. Was it you? Mr. Tunn asked. Or was it collaborative work you claimed solo credit for? Was it your language skills or your husband's? Was it your dedication or your misrepresentation of your circumstances? Emma had no answer. We'll be conducting a full review of your accounts, Margaret Hsu continued. Your client work, your expense reports, your performance evaluations. If we find additional misrepresentations, we'll need to discuss your continued employment with the firm." The weight of those words crushed the air from the room. Emma looked at me, her eyes desperate. "David, please tell them. Tell them I'm good at my work. Tell them I deserve this." And I could have. I could have softened it, defended her talent, argued that her professional capabilities were real, even if her personal representations weren't. But I thought about 7 years of being diminished, 7 years of emails calling me simple, unambitious, a burden, 7 years of being deliberately kept invisible so she could shine brighter. "You're good at your work," I said slowly. "You're talented and smart and capable, but you're also willing to lie, to manipulate, to use people, even the people who love you, to get what you want. That's not someone who deserves partnership. That's someone who needs to learn what integrity actually means." Emma made a sound like something had broken inside her, a sob, or maybe just the last of her composure shattering. "This meeting is concluded." Margaret Shue said, "Emma, take the rest of the day. We'll schedule a follow-up meeting for Monday to discuss next steps." Emma stood on shaking legs. She looked at each of the partners, then finally at me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "David, I'm so sorry." I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. She left, and through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched her walk down the hallway. Her shoulders were hunched, her perfect posture finally broken. She looked small, diminished, the way she'd made me feel for 7 years. The partners were quiet for a moment, then Miss Oliveira spoke softly. "Are you all right, David?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "You did the right thing," Mr. Weber said, coming forward, telling the truth. "Did I?" I asked. "Or did I just destroy my marriage to make a point?" "You didn't destroy anything," Mr. Tunn said firmly. "Emma destroyed it when she chose lies over honesty. You just refused to be complicit anymore." I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed him. "What will you do now?" Margaret Shue asked. "I don't know that either," I admitted. Mr. Weber handed me a business card, my personal numbers on the back. "If you need anything, references, connections, even just someone to talk to, call me." I took the card, slipped it into my pocket next to Emma's note from this morning. "I love you." But love without respect is just another kind of harm. I left the building as the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the glass towers gold and copper. The city looked beautiful from the outside. It always did. Inside, though, everything was falling apart, and I had no idea how to put it back together, or if I even wanted to. I drove home through evening traffic, but I couldn't tell you what route I took. My hands knew the way, muscle memory guiding the car, while my mind was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere suspended between the life I'd thought I was living and the reality I'd just uncovered. The house was dark when I arrived. Emma's car wasn't in the driveway. I wondered if she'd gone back to the office to clear out her desk, or if she was sitting in some parking lot somewhere trying to process the demolition of everything she'd built. Part of me felt a terrible guilt. I'd walked into that conference room and methodically dismantled her career, her reputation, her future. I'd watched her crumble, and I'd done nothing to stop it. But another part of me, the part that had read those emails, that personal statement that had spent 7 years being systematically erased, felt something else. Relief. I was finally visible, finally real, finally allowed to exist. Exist in my full complexity instead of the simplified, diminished version Emma had created. Is that what revenge feels like? Not hot and angry, but cold and clarifying. I let myself into the house, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the entryway. Everything looked the same. The family photos on the wall, carefully curated images of a happy couple. The living room furniture we'd chosen together. the kitchen where we'd shared 1,000 meals. But it was all set, dressing now, props in a performance I hadn't realized I was giving. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a scotch from the bottle we kept for special occasions, drank it, standing at the counter, staring at nothing. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. I turned off the sound in the conference room, but now I pulled it out and looked at the screen. 17 missed calls from Emma, 23 text messages. I scrolled through them, watching her desperation escalate. "Please answer. We need to talk. David, I know you're angry, but please just talk to me. They're taking everything. Everything I've worked for. Please, I can fix this. I can make this right. Just give me a chance. Where are you? Are you coming home? I love you. Please remember that I love you." The last message was from 20 minutes ago. "I'm coming home. I need to see you. Please be there." I looked at the clock. If she'd sent that 20 minutes ago and was driving from downtown, she'd be here in about 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to decide what I was going to say to her. I poured another scotch. The thing about truth is that it's like a floodgate. Once you open it, you can't control what comes through. I'd opened it that morning when I looked through Emma's computer. I'd opened it wider in the conference room, and now I could feel it building, all the questions and realizations I'd been too shocked to process earlier. Why hadn't I noticed? That was the question that kept circling back. 7 years. How had I lived with someone for 7 years and never realized she was lying about me to her entire professional world? Because I'd trusted her. Because I'd believed that marriage meant partnership, honesty, mutual respect. Because I'd assumed that the woman I fell asleep next to was the same woman who walked into that office building every morning. I'd been naive. Or maybe just hopeful. Maybe there's not much difference between the two. Headlights swept across the living room window. A car door slammed. I stayed in the kitchen, took another sip of scotch, and waited. The front door opened. Emma's footsteps slower than earlier, heavy with exhaustion or defeat, or both. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I almost didn't recognize her. She'd been crying. Her face was blotchy, her eyes swollen. She'd taken off her suit jacket somewhere, and her white blouse was wrinkled, untucked. Her hair had come loose from its severe bun. She looked younger, more vulnerable, more like the woman I'd married. "You came home," she said, and her voice was, "I live here," I replied. She flinched at the coldness in my tone. Can we talk?" "What's left to talk about, Emma?" She moved into the kitchen, but she didn't come close to me. Instead, she leaned against the opposite counter, maintaining distance. "Everything," she said. "There's everything to talk about, then talk." She drew a shaky breath. "They've put me on administrative leave. While they conduct their review, Margaret Sue says it could take weeks, and depending on what they find, I might—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Lose your job," I finished for her. "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. I should have felt sympathy. She was my wife, and she was losing everything. But I kept thinking about that personal statement about being called a burden, about 7 years of deliberate eraser. "What did you expect?" I asked. "You built your entire career on lies about your finances, your capabilities, your personal life. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" I thought she wiped at her eyes. I thought I could keep them separate, that my work life and my home life were two different things, and never the two should meet. Except you needed them to meet. I said you needed my language skills for your clients. You needed my income to support the lifestyle you claimed to be sacrificing for. You needed my absence to prove your dedication. You didn't keep our lives separate, Emma. You just lied about how they connected. She nodded miserably. "You're right. You're completely right." "Then why did you do it?" "I told you." "No," I interrupted. "I heard what you told the partners. The story about being overshadowed, about needing to stand out. But I want to know the real reason, the one you haven't said yet. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to the kitchen table, sat down in the chair she'd occupied at breakfast 1,000 times, the chair where she'd read the newspaper while I made coffee, where she'd reviewed contracts while I cooked dinner, where we'd existed in the same space without really seeing each other. "Do you remember when we met?" she asked. "Of course. You were presenting at that conference on cybersecurity frameworks, and I was sitting in the audience completely lost, understanding maybe one word in 3, but you made it sound so simple, so clear. And afterward, during the networking session, you were surrounded by people. Everyone wanted to talk to you, ask you questions, get your card. I remember I said I'd noticed her then, standing at the edge of the crowd, looking uncomfortable in her professional clothes, like she'd borrowed someone else's life. I was nobody, Emma continued, a junior associate at a firm that had hired me as their diversity candidate, the scholarship kid they could point to when people asked about their commitment to economic inclusion. I was drowning, David. Every day felt like proof that I didn't belong there. She looked up at me and her eyes were raw. And then I met you. Brilliant, accomplished, multilingual you. And when you asked me to dinner, when you seemed genuinely interested in me, I thought this was my chance. My chance to be somebody, to have the kind of life people in my firm had, the kind of life I'd only ever seen from the outside. So you did marry me for my resume, I said. I married you because I loved you, she insisted. But yes, I also thought being with you would legitimize me, would make me belong in those rooms full of people who'd always belonged. What changed? I asked. When did it shift from we're building a life together to I need to hide you? Emma's laugh was bitter. That first company party. Remember how excited I was? I thought it would be perfect. I'd show up with my impressive husband and everyone would see that I belonged, that I'd made it. And you were too impressive. She said, you didn't just fit in, David, you exceeded. You spoke 3 different languages that night. You had in-depth conversations about international markets with partners I'd been too intimidated to approach. You charmed everyone. And by the end of the night, I'd heard the same question from 5 different people. What question? How did you land someone like him? Emma's voice cracked. Like I was the lucky one. Like you were the catch and I was the one who'd somehow tricked you into marrying me. I absorbed this slowly. So you decided to rewrite the story. I decided to protect myself, she corrected. The next event, I told people you couldn't come, that you had work, and it felt easier. I could be Emma Chen, talented associate, instead of Emma Chen, the scholarship kid who married well. I could stand on my own accomplishments without constantly being compared to you. Except they weren't your own accomplishments, I said quietly. You were using my skills, my income, my absence. You weren't standing on your own. You were standing on a foundation of lies and calling it independence. She buried her face in her hands. I know, God. David, I know. It started as protection and it became something else. Every time someone asked about you, I made you a little smaller. And every time I made you smaller, I felt a little bigger. Until the lies were so embedded I couldn't extract them without everything collapsing. So you kept lying. I kept surviving, she said desperately. Do you have any idea what it's like to be a woman in that environment? To constantly prove you're not just a diversity hire, not just someone who got lucky, not just riding on someone else's success. I had to be exceptional. I had to be undeniable, and I couldn't do that if everyone knew I had advantages. So you invented disadvantages instead. I said, you turned me into an albatross around your neck, made yourself a martyr to a marriage that was actually supporting you. Yes, she whispered. And I'm sorry. I'm so so sorry. The apology hung in the air between us. 7 years of lies, and she was sorry. What do you want me to do with that? I asked. With your sorry. Forgive me, she said. Help me fix this. We can go back to the partners together. Tell them the truth, the whole truth, and maybe they'll reconsider. The truth is what destroyed your partnership application, I interrupted. There's no version of the truth that saves your career, Emma. You lied to the firm for 7 years. You used your husband's skills to secure clients while claiming he was professionally useless. You submitted a partnership application built on fabrications. That's not fixable. Then what am I supposed to do? She cried. This is my career, David. This is everything I've worked for. Everything you've lied for, I corrected. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching me lose everything, getting your revenge. Is that what you think this is? I asked. Revenge? What else would you call it? You went to my bosses. You showed them private emails, financial records, everything you could find to make me look bad. You systematically destroyed my career. If that's not revenge, what is it? I set down my glass carefully. It's truth, Emma. I showed them the truth. I didn't fabricate anything. I didn't exaggerate or manipulate or spin a narrative. I just presented facts. The fact that those facts destroyed your career says more about the career you built than it does about me. You could have come to me first, she said. You could have given me a chance to fix it before involving them. Like you gave me a chance to know what you were saying about me, I countered. Like you consulted me before turning me into a character in your professional fiction. She had no answer for that. We stood there in the kitchen, the space between us feeling wider than it had ever been. The same room where we'd shared breakfast that morning, where I'd made her coffee the way she liked it, where I'd existed in the comfortable delusion that we were partners. I don't know how to fix this, Emma said finally, and she sounded lost, young. I don't know how to fix us. Maybe you can't, I said. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples in all directions. Don't say that, Emma whispered. Please don't say that. Why not? It's true, isn't it? You built an entire identity on lying about me, about us. How do we come back from that? People rebuild after affairs, she said desperately. After addictions, after bankruptcy, after trust is broken, I finished. But Emma, you didn't just break my trust. You broke me. You spent 7 years systematically diminishing me, erasing me, rewriting me into something less than I am. Do you understand what that does to a person? To spend 7 years being loved in private and denied in public. I never denied loving you. You denied that I was worth loving, I said, and my voice was hard now. You denied that I was accomplished, capable, valuable. You turned me into a burden you were nolly carrying instead of a partner you were grateful to have. That's not just broken trust, Emma. That's broken respect. And I don't know if respect can be rebuilt once it's gone. She was crying again, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to cross that space between us and hold her the way I had 1,000 times before, but couldn't, because the woman I'd been holding all those times, the woman I thought I knew, didn't exist. She was a fiction, just like the version of me she'd created for her colleagues. We were both characters in stories the other had written, and neither of those stories was true. What happens now? Emma asked through her tears. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time, space. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not playing the role you assigned me. Are you leaving? The question I'd been avoiding all afternoon. Was I leaving? Should I leave? I don't know, I said again. But I think maybe you should, just for a while. Stay with a friend, Get a hotel, I don't care. But I can't be in this house with you right now. I can't look at you without seeing 7 years of lies. This is my house too, she said weakly. That I paid for, I reminded her. That my basic freelance IT work paid for. So right now, I'm asking you to leave just for a few days. Please. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or hope? She didn't find it. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll pack a bag. She left the kitchen, and I heard her climbing the stairs to our bedroom, heard drawers opening, the closet sliding, the sounds of a life being temporarily packed away. I stayed in the kitchen, finishing my scotch, staring at the place where she'd sat, the chair where my wife had breakfast every morning before going to work and lying about me. 20 minutes later, she came back down with an overnight bag and her work laptop. I'm staying at the Marriott downtown, she said. If you need me, if you want to talk. I nodded but said nothing. She hesitated at the door. David, do you still love me? It was the question I'd been asking myself all day. Did I still love her? Could you love someone who'd spent 7 years lying about you, who'd turned you into something small and simple so they could feel bigger? I don't know, I said. I loved who I thought you were. I don't know if that person ever existed. She flinched like I'd slapped her, and she left, and I heard her car start, heard her drive away. The house settled into silence. I sat down at the kitchen table in the spot where Emma had just been crying, and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Anger, betrayal, grief for a marriage that had never been what I thought it was, but also something else, something unexpected. Freedom. For the first time in 7 years, I didn't have to make myself smaller, didn't have to stay quiet or invisible or carefully out of the way. I could be exactly who I was, accomplished, multilingual, successful, worthy. The question was, what did I do with that freedom? The first night alone in the house was strange, not lonely. I'd spent plenty of evenings alone when Emma worked late, but this was different. This was the silence of absence rather than delay. The knowledge that she wasn't coming home at 11 with takeout and apologies. I slept in our bed, or rather, I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling for hours before finally drifting off around 3. When I woke up, the space beside me was undisturbed, the sheets smooth and cold. I made coffee the way I actually liked it, strong, black. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and dark and unapologetic. It was Saturday. Normally, Emma and I would have gone to the farmer's market, browsed the stalls, bought overpriced vegetables. We'd feel virtuous about eating. Normal couple things. The choreography of a marriage. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. If I was going to rebuild, I needed to understand the full scope of what had been built on lies. I needed to see everything. I started with my own professional correspondence. Emails I'd sent over the years, opportunities I'd turned down, connections I'd let fade because Emma had said she needed me here, needed the stability of our home life, needed my support. A position at a cybersecurity firm in Singapore 18 months ago. They'd wanted me to head their Asia-Pacific division. 6-figure salary, relocation package, the works. I declined because Emma had said she was up for a promotion and couldn't possibly relocate. She'd cried, said she'd never ask me to sacrifice my career, but this timing was just impossible. I pulled up Emma's work calendar from that period. The promotion she'd been up for, it hadn't happened. She'd been passed over, and instead of telling me, she'd let me believe my sacrifice had been meaningful. A consulting contract with the European Union 2 years ago, 3 months in Brussels, working on cybersecurity infrastructure. I'd wanted to take it, had been excited about it. Emma had said it would be too hard on our marriage. The 3 months apart would damage us irreparably. She'd suggested I propose a remote arrangement instead. I'd proposed remote. They declined. The position required on-site presence. I checked Emma's calendar from that period, too. She'd been traveling constantly. Sao Paulo, Frankfurt, Tokyo. She'd been gone more than she'd been home. She hadn't needed me here. She'd needed me contained. The realization settled like ice in my chest. It wasn't just about hiding me from her professional world. It was about preventing me from having a professional world that might rival hers, about keeping me in place, accessible when she needed my skills, invisible when she needed her narrative. I was still processing this when my phone rang. Mr. Weber. "David, I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," I said. It was 9:30. I'd been up for hours. "I wanted to check on you. Yesterday was difficult for everyone involved." "I'm managing," I said, which was the diplomatic version of, I spent the night cataloging all the ways my marriage was a lie. "I also wanted to discuss something with you. Would you have time to meet for coffee this morning? There's a conversation I'd like to have, but I'd prefer to do it in person." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Wilhelm Weber in a quiet cafe near the waterfront. He ordered an espresso. I got another black coffee, enjoying the freedom of not having to ask for cream and sugar. "How are you, really?" he asked once we were settled. "Honestly, I don't know. I keep finding new layers of it, new lies, new manipulations. I thought I knew the scope yesterday, but I'm realizing it goes deeper." He nodded thoughtfully. "I've seen this before. Not often, but occasionally. Someone builds an identity on a foundation of fiction, and when it collapses, you discover the fiction went further than anyone realized." "Have you found more?" I asked. "In your review of Emma's work?" He sighed. "We're still conducting the investigation, so I can't share specifics, but I can say that the patterns we're seeing are concerning. Client work attributed solely to Emma that involved multiple team members. Expense reports that may have been inflated. Small things individually, but collectively they paint a picture of someone willing to bend truth for advancement." "She's going to lose her job," I said. It wasn't a question. "Very likely," he confirmed. "We're being thorough, giving her every opportunity to explain or provide context. But yes, unless we discover some extraordinary mitigating circumstances, her employment will be terminated." I should have felt worse about it. She was my wife. Her career was being destroyed. But all I could think was, she destroyed it herself. "That's not actually why I asked you here," Mr. Weber said, pulling me from my thoughts. "I wanted to discuss your career." "My career? David, you're exceptionally qualified, multilingual, experienced in international markets, expert in cybersecurity. These are valuable skills. And yet, from what I understand, you've been working primarily from home on freelance contracts. Why?" The answer sat bitter on my tongue. Because Emma needed me to stay small. Because my success threatened her narrative. Because I'd made myself less to make her more. "I thought I was supporting my wife's career," I said carefully, "providing stability at home so she could focus on her work. I turned down several positions that would have required relocation or extensive travel." "Positions like the EU consulting contract?" he asked. I blinked. "How did you know about that?" "I know the team that hired for that position," he said. "When I was reviewing your credentials yesterday, I reached out to some contacts. Your name came up. They were disappointed when you couldn't accept. Said you would have been perfect for it. They found someone else. I assume they did, but the position you would have filled. It led to other opportunities. The consultant they hired is now heading their entire cyber division. That could have been you, David." The weight of that possibility sat heavy between us. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I think you've been deliberately limiting yourself," Mr. Weber said, "and I think it's time you stopped. You're 42 years old. You're at the peak of your career potential. Don't waste it." "What are you proposing?" He pulled out a folder. these managing partners and their folders, and slid it across the table. Our firm does significant international business. We need cybersecurity consulting, particularly for our European and Asian operations. We need someone who can work across languages, across cultures, understand both the technical and business implications. I opened the folder. Inside was a contract proposal. The numbers made my eyes widen. "This is a senior consultant position," Mr. Weber explained. "You'd work directly with our international offices, advise on security protocols, help us navigate the increasingly complex regulatory environments. Some travel required, maybe 30% of the time, but you'd have autonomy, authority, and honestly, you'd be doing us a tremendous favor. This is a lot of money," I said, still staring at the figures. "It's what you're worth," he corrected. "It's what someone with your qualification should have been making all along." I looked up at him. "Is this charity or guilt? Because my wife lost her position with your firm." "It's neither," he said firmly. "It's recognition of talent. Emma's situation is separate from this. We've been looking for someone to fill this role for 6 months. You're qualified. More than qualified. The fact that you're available is fortunate timing. I need to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need. But David," he leaned forward, his expression serious, "don't make decisions based on protecting Emma's feelings or managing her career. Make decisions based on what's right for you. You've spent enough time being small. It's time to be exactly as large as you are." After he left, I sat in the cafe for another hour reading through the contract. The scope of work was impressive, challenging, the kind of thing I would have jumped at 7 years ago before I'd started making myself smaller. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Claudia Oliveira. Wilhelm told me he met with you this morning. I hope he extended our offer. I also wanted you to know what Emma did to you was wrong. But what you're doing now, taking back your life, your career, that's powerful. Don't let guilt stop you from being who you're meant to be." I stared at the message. These people, Emma's colleagues, the partners she'd worked with for years, they were supporting me, seeing value in me, while Emma had spent 7 years trying to convince them I had none. I texted back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." I drove home with the contract on the passenger seat, a tangible weight of possibility. The house still felt too quiet. I kept expecting to hear Emma moving around upstairs, to smell her perfume, to see evidence of her presence, but there was nothing, just empty space where a marriage used to be. I went to the office, sat at my desk, and opened my email. More opportunities had come in overnight. Requests for consultations, invitations to conferences, job inquiries. My inbox was full of professional interest that I'd been too buried in domesticity to notice. One email caught my eye from a cybersecurity conference in Berlin scheduled for next month. "Dear Dr. Chen, we would be honored if you would consider being a keynote speaker at our annual conference. Your work on database encryption protocols has been foundational to our field, and we believe our attendees would greatly benefit from your insights. Please let us know if this is something you'd be interested in. Dr. Chen." I'd earned that doctorate from MIT, but Emma had never called me that, had actively discouraged me from using the title because she said it sounded pretentious. But it wasn't pretentious. It was accurate. It was who I was. I replied, "I would be honored to speak. Please send details." Then I opened a new document and started writing. Not for work, not for any purpose except to process what I was feeling. I spent 7 years of my life making myself smaller. I convinced myself it was love. Supporting my wife, giving her space to shine, not competing with her success. But it wasn't love. It was a racer. And I participated in it. I let her rewrite me into something less because I thought that's what a good husband did. The words flowed faster than I expected, 7 years of silence pouring out onto the page. I turned down jobs, I stayed out of social situations, I made my coffee wrong and pretended not to notice. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of my wife's ambition. But I'm done being a ghost. I wrote for 2 hours, purging it all, the anger, the betrayal, the grief, but also the clarity. The understanding that I deserved better, that I was worth more than I'd been settling for. When I finished, I had 10 pages of raw, honest reflection. I saved it. Maybe someday I'd do something with it, maybe not. But writing it had been necessary. My phone rang again, this time Emma. I let it ring. She called again, then texted. "Please talk to me. I know you need space, but I need to know if there's any hope, any chance we can fix this." Could we? Was there any version of our marriage that could survive this? I thought about the contract from Whitmore and Associates, about the keynote in Berlin, about all the opportunities I'd turned down and all the ways I'd diminished myself. And I thought about Emma, sitting in a hotel room somewhere, her career destroyed, her lies exposed, facing the consequences of 7 years of choices. Did I still love her? The question kept coming back. I loved who I thought she was, but that person, the woman who valued me, respected me, wanted me as a true partner, had she ever existed? Or had she always been the woman who needed me small so she could feel big? I typed back, "I don't know if there's hope. I don't know anything right now except that I can't go back to being who I was. If we have any chance, it starts with me being fully myself. And I don't know if you can handle that." Her reply came immediately. "I want to handle it. I want to try. Please, David, let me try." Then let me have this time. Let me figure out who I am when I'm not playing the role you wrote for me. Give me space to be big for a while. If there's something left after that, we'll talk. How long? I don't know. Weeks, maybe months, however long it takes. There was a long pause before her next message. "Okay, I'll wait. I love you." I didn't respond to that because I didn't know if I loved her back anymore. Love without respect wasn't really love. It was just habit, wearing love's clothes. I spent the rest of the weekend reading through the Whitmore contract, researching the Berlin conference, reaching out to old colleagues I'd let drift. Each email I sent, each connection I renewed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd surrendered. On Sunday evening, I made myself an elaborate dinner, the kind I used to cook before Emma said it was too much trouble for just the two of us. I opened a good bottle of wine, set the table properly, ate slowly and mindfully. I was having dinner with myself, getting to know the person I'd buried for 7 years. He was interesting, accomplished, worthy of respect, and he deserved better than what he'd been accepting. On Monday morning, I called Mr. Weber. "I've reviewed the contract," I said. "I'm interested. When can we start discussing details?" "How about this afternoon?" he suggested. "We can meet at the office." Emma's office, the place I'd been systematically excluded from. "I'll be there," I said. I dressed carefully, not the suit Emma had bought me. I donated that to Goodwill on Sunday. Instead, I wore one of my own suits, the ones I'd bought for conferences and presentations, looked at myself into the mirror and saw someone who belonged in professional spaces. I saw someone who didn't need permission to exist. When I walked into Whitmore and Associates at 2 o'clock, the receptionist recognized me from Friday. "Mr. Chen," she said warmly, "they're ready for you in conference room B." Not the executive conference room where Emma's career had ended. A different room. A fresh start. Mr. Weber, Ms. Olivia, and Mr. Tun were there along with 2 other people I didn't recognize, the heads of their European and Asian divisions. David. Mr. Weber stood shaking my hand. "Thank you for coming. Let's talk about your future." And for the first time in 7 years, when someone said your future, they meant mine. Not Emma's, not our marriages, not the fiction we'd been living. Mine. I sat down at the table and I let myself take up space. All the space I deserved. 3 weeks later, I was standing in a hotel room in Frankfurt, looking out at a city I'd lived in 15 years ago when I was someone else entirely. Young, ambitious, undiminished. The view from the 23rd floor stretched across the main river, the skyline a mixture of historic and modern, old Europe and new capital existing side by side. I'd forgotten how much I loved this city, or maybe I just buried that love along with everything else I'd made smaller to fit into Emma's narrative. The conference started tomorrow. My keynote was scheduled for 10 a.m., but tonight was the welcome reception, and I was actually looking forward to it. Looking forward to conversations in multiple languages, to networking without apologizing for my presence, to being exactly as accomplished as I actually was. My phone buzzed. A text from Ms. Olivia. Ready for tomorrow? You're going to be brilliant. The Berlin team is already talking about how excited they are to work with you. I'd signed the contract with Whitmore & Associates 2 weeks ago. The Berlin keynote had been my first official assignment. Represent the firm, make connections, establish credibility in the European market. What should have felt like pressure felt like liberation instead. I was being paid to be myself, to use my languages, my experience, my expertise, to take up space professionally without apology or reduction. As ready as I'll ever be, I texted back. Thank you for the opportunity. You earned it. Now go show them what you're made of. I put on my suit, not a new one, but one I'd owned for years and never worn because Emma said navy blue was too bold for me. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone who belonged here. Someone who'd spent 15 years building expertise and 7 years pretending it didn't matter. I was done pretending. The reception was in the hotel's grand ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and Baroque excess. The kind of European elegance that Americans try to replicate but never quite manage. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and took a moment to observe. The crowd was international, multilingual, exactly my kind of environment. I caught fragments of German, French, Italian, Mandarin. People moved through the space with the confidence of those who regularly occupied rooms like this. Security professionals, tech executives, policymakers. My people. I'd just forgotten they were my people. Dr. Chen. I turned to find a woman in her 50s extending her hand, her German accent precise. I'm Dr. Christina Bauer from the Federal Office for Information Security. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your paper on encryption protocols was referenced in our latest security brief. Thank you, I said in German, shaking her hand. I'm honored. It was useful. Useful? It was foundational. She gestured to a small group nearby. Come, you must meet the team. We have so many questions. And just like that, I was pulled into a conversation about quantum-resistant cryptography, speaking fluent German to people who cared about my expertise. No one asked about my wife or my home life or whether I was a burden to anyone. They cared about what I knew, what I could contribute, who I was professionally. It was intoxicating. An hour into the reception, I found myself in conversation with a group from Singapore, switching seamlessly from German to Mandarin. We were discussing the challenges of implementing security frameworks across different regulatory environments when someone joined our circle. David Chen, the newcomer said in Mandarin. I heard you were here. I had to come introduce myself. I turned. The man was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of easy confidence that came from success. I'm sorry. Have we met? No, but I know your work. I'm James Wu. I took the EU consulting position you turned down 2 years ago. The floor tilted slightly beneath me. The position Emma had convinced me to decline. Ah, I managed. Wilhelm mentioned you were doing well. I'm doing extremely well, actually, James said. And there was no arrogance in it, just fact. That position opened doors I never expected. I'm heading the cyber division now for the entire EU governance structure. It's been incredible. That could have been me. The thought was automatic, visceral, but James was still talking. I wanted to thank you. Actually, when I heard you declined, I almost didn't apply. I thought if someone of your caliber passed on it, it must not be the opportunity it seemed. But I'm glad I took the chance. You should be proud, I said, and meant it. It sounds like you've made the most of it. I have, but I've also been following your work. Your recent publications on Zero Trust architecture. Brilliant. I'd love to discuss collaboration opportunities. The EU is moving toward implementing those protocols, and having you consult would be invaluable. We talked for 20 minutes about potential projects, exchange of expertise, the possibility of me coming to Brussels for a few months to advise on implementation. The job I'd turned down was offering itself back to me in a different form because I was ready for it now. Because I'd stopped making myself small. When James moved on to network with others, I stood alone for a moment, processing. I'd spent 2 years thinking I'd sacrifice that opportunity for Emma's career, but Emma's career hadn't needed my sacrifice. She'd been traveling constantly during that period. She just needed me to stay small, stay contained, stay less than I was. And I'd done it. I'd chosen her comfort over my growth. Never again. You looked deep in thought. I turned to find Mr. Weber beside me, also holding champagne. Wilhelm, I didn't know you were coming. Last-minute decision, he said. Wanted to see how you were settling in. How's it going? Better than I expected, I admitted. I'd forgotten how much I enjoy this. Being recognized for your expertise. Being myself, I corrected. He nodded slowly. Yes, that's the tragedy, isn't it? That you had to forget in the first place. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the crowd mingle and connect. How is Emma? I asked. The question surprised me. I'd been avoiding thinking about her, about us, about the wreckage of our marriage. Not well, Wilhelm said carefully. The firm terminated her employment last week. The investigation found too many discrepancies, false attributions, inflated expense reports, misrepresentations to clients. Nothing criminal, but enough to make her unemployable at our level. She built her entire identity on lies, I said quietly. And when the foundation collapsed, everything went with it. Yes, she did. He paused. Has she contacted you? Every day, I admitted. Texts mostly asking if we can talk, if there's hope, if I still love her. Do you? It was the question I'd been avoiding. I don't know. I loved who I thought she was, but that person, I'm not sure she ever existed. The woman I married and the woman who systematically erased me for 7 years, I can't reconcile them. Perhaps you're not meant to, Wilhelm suggested. Perhaps the reconciliation you need is with yourself, with the man you were before you started diminishing yourself. I'm working on that. I can see, he said, gesturing to the room. You're flourishing, David. In 3 weeks, you've made more professional connections than most people make in years. The European division is already talking about you as indispensable. You're being yourself, and it's remarkable to watch. The words settled warmly in my chest. Indispensable. Remarkable. Not simple, not basic, not unambitious. Remarkable. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Wilhelm noticed. Emma, probably. You'll need to make a decision, eventually, he said gently. About the marriage, about what happens next. I know, but not tonight. Tonight I was in Frankfurt speaking languages Emma had used me for networking in rooms. She'd kept me from being the person I'd buried to make her comfortable. Tonight was about reclamation. The reception lasted another 2 hours. I exchanged business cards, made dinner plans, committed to consulting projects. By the time I returned to my room, I had 17 new contacts and 6 potential contracts. I also had 23 messages from Emma. I sat on the hotel bed and finally read them. I know you're in Frankfurt. I saw it on the Whitmore website. You're giving the keynote. I'm proud of you. I mean that. I know I have no right to say it, but I'm proud. I got fired. I assume you heard. They found everything, all the lies, all the exaggerations, everything I built is gone. I deserved it, I know that. But it doesn't make it hurt less. I'm seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did, why I needed you to be small so I could feel big. She says it's about my own insecurities, about never feeling like I belonged. So I had to prove I deserved my place. And the easiest way to do that was to make you the one who didn't belong instead. That's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what I did to you. But maybe it's an explanation. I miss you. I miss our life. Even though I know that life was built on lies. I keep thinking about our wedding, how happy we were, how much potential we had, and I wonder when I decided to waste it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think I deserve forgiveness. But I am asking you to let me try to be better, to be someone worthy of the man you actually are. If you need to divorce me, I'll understand. I won't fight it. I'll sign whatever you want. You deserve to be free of this. But if there's any part of you that thinks we could rebuild from honesty instead of lies, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to be uncomfortable, to face the truth, to see you as you actually are instead of who I needed you to be. I love you. I know I showed it wrong for 7 years, but I do love you. Enjoy your keynote tomorrow. Show them what I was too insecure to let anyone see. You're brilliant, David. You always have been. And I'm sorry I needed you to hide it. I read the messages 3 times, looking for manipulation, for strategy, for the Emma who'd spent 7 years rewriting reality to suit her needs. But all I found was pain. Honest, raw pain. Maybe that was progress. Maybe it wasn't enough. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and reviewed my keynote presentation one final time. The slides were clean, professional, showcasing 7 years of research and innovation. Research I'd done while Emma was at dinner parties I wasn't invited to. Innovation I developed while making myself small in my own home. This presentation was mine. My expertise, my voice, my right to occupy space and be heard. No one had made it small to fit their narrative. I woke the next morning to sunshine streaming through the hotel windows. The morning felt crisp, full of possibility. I dressed carefully, rehearsed my opening remarks in German, and took a car to the conference center. The auditorium was already filling when I arrived. 300 seats and nearly everyone would be occupied. I stood backstage watching people file in, hearing the multilingual hum of conversation. 7 years ago, I would have been nervous, would have wondered if I deserved to be here, if I was good enough, if I had the right to speak with authority. But 7 years ago, I hadn't spent 7 years being systematically diminished. I hadn't discovered what it felt like to be erased and then fight my way back to visibility. I'd earned this podium with research and expertise and years of work that Emma had tried to make invisible, and I was going to own it. The conference organizer found me backstage. "Dr. Chen, we're ready for you. Are you prepared?" "Absolutely," I said. I walked onto the stage to applause. 300 people who'd come to hear me speak. Not Emma's husband, not the simple homebody. Me. I spoke for 45 minutes in fluent German, switching occasionally to English for technical terms that didn't translate cleanly. I discussed quantum cryptography, zero-trust architecture, the future of digital security in an increasingly connected world. And people listened. They took notes. They nodded. They engaged with the material like it mattered, because it did matter. I mattered. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. The Q&A session ran 20 minutes over because people had so many questions. Afterward, there was a line of people wanting to speak with me, exchange cards, discuss collaboration. I was brilliant. I'd always been brilliant. I just spent 7 years pretending I wasn't. That evening, I had dinner with the Whitmore European team. Ms. Olivia had flown in from Sao Paulo specifically to attend. We sat in a traditional German restaurant, drinking excellent wine and discussing the future. "You were extraordinary today," she said, raising her glass. To David Chen, the man we should have known years ago, if only his wife hadn't hidden him. The table toasted. I accepted it with grace. "She didn't hide me," I said quietly. "I let myself be hidden. That's on both of us." "Perhaps," Wilhelm said, "but you're visible now, and it suits you." Later, back in my hotel room, I finally responded to Emma's messages. "I was brilliant today. You were right about that. But I wasn't brilliant because you finally let me be. I was brilliant because I finally let myself be. That's the difference. I don't know if we can rebuild. I don't know if I want to rebuild with someone who needed me small. But I appreciate the honesty in your messages. It's more than I got for 7 years. I'm staying in Europe for 2 more weeks. Business meetings, consulting opportunities. When I get back, we need to talk, really talk, about divorce, about separation, about whether there's anything left worth saving. Until then, I'm going to keep being brilliant, keep being visible, keep being exactly as large as I actually am. And you need to figure out if you can love that version of me, because he's the only version I'm willing to be anymore. I hit send and turned off my phone. Tomorrow I had meetings in Berlin. Next week, Brussels. The week after, back to Singapore. I was rebuilding my life, my career, my sense of self. And Emma. Emma was somewhere back in our city, sitting in the wreckage of what she'd built on lies, trying to figure out who she was without them. Maybe she'd figure it out. Maybe we'd find a way back to each other from honesty instead of fiction. But even if we didn't, I'd be fine, because I'd finally learned the most important truth. I didn't need her to be worthy. I'd been worthy all along. The flight from Frankfurt to home was 11 hours. 11 hours of suspended reality, floating between the life I'd been reclaiming in Europe and the marriage I'd left in pieces back home. I'd spent 2 weeks being exactly who I was, speaking 5 languages, consulting with governments and corporations, being recognized, respected, valued. Every meeting, every presentation, every conversation had been another brick in the reconstruction of the person Emma had systematically dismantled. But now, I was going home to the house we'd bought together, to the marriage that existed somewhere between fiction and truth. To Emma, who'd been sending me messages every day. Fewer demands now, more reflections, more honesty than I'd gotten in 7 years. The question was, did honesty matter when it came 7 years too late? I'd arranged for a car from the airport. It was late afternoon when I pulled into our driveway, the golden hour, photographers call it, when everything looked softer and more forgiving than it actually is. Emma's car wasn't there. We'd agreed to meet at 7. That gave me time to settle in, to prepare for whatever conversation was coming. The house felt different, or maybe I would different, and that changed how I saw it. The photos on the walls looked staged now. The furniture we'd chosen together felt like set pieces, this whole life we'd built. It had been a performance, and I hadn't even known I was acting. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, I supposed, and unpacked. Hung up the suits I'd worn to important meetings, set out the business cards I'd collected from people who saw value in me. Tangible evidence that I existed, that I mattered, that I was more than the character Emma had written. My phone buzzed. "Emma, I'm on my way. I'm nervous. I don't know what you're going to say." I typed back, "I don't know either." It was true. I'd spent 2 weeks thinking about this moment, and I still didn't have an answer. Could a marriage survive what ours had been through? Should it? I changed into comfortable clothes, jeans and a sweater, the kind of thing I'd worn all the time before Emma suggested I dress more professionally, even at home. Another small way I'd accommodated, adjusted, made myself fit her preferred version. At 6:58, I heard her car in the driveway. At 6:59, her key in the lock. At 7, she was standing in the living room doorway, and I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, not in a healthy way, in the way people do when they're too stressed to eat. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no elaborate styling. She wore jeans and a plain shirt. No armor, no professional polish, just Emma, stripped of all the layers she'd built up. "Hi," she said, and her voice was small. "Hi." We stood there for a moment, strangers in our own home. "Can I sit?" she asked. "Of course, you live here." "Do I?" The question was genuine. "I don't know what we are anymore, David. I don't know what this is." She sat on the couch. I took the armchair across from her. The arrangement of people having a serious conversation, not the casual proximity of spouses. "How is Europe?" she asked. "Transformative," I said honestly. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be myself professionally, to use all my languages, all my experience without worrying about making anyone uncomfortable. She flinched but nodded. "I'm glad I saw some of the coverage. The conference posted photos. You looked happy." "I was happier than you've looked in years," she said quietly. "Happier than you've looked with me." I didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. Emma drew a shaky breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of therapy, trying to understand how I became someone who could do what I did to you." "And what did you discover?" "That I've been terrified my entire adult life," she said, "terrified of being found out as a fraud, of people realizing I didn't belong in those rooms at that firm in that life. I was the scholarship kid who made it out, and I've spent every day since waiting for someone to send me back." She looked at me and her eyes were red-rimmed. "And then I married you. Brilliant, accomplished, effortlessly belonging you. And instead of feeling safe, instead of feeling like I'd found my partner, I felt more threatened than ever because I reminded you of what you felt you weren't." I said, "Yes," and I couldn't stand it. So I rewrote the story, made you smaller so I could feel bigger, made you simple so I could feel complex, made you invisible so I could shine. She wiped at her eyes. I convinced myself I was protecting us, our marriage, but I was just protecting my fragile ego. "You weren't protecting anything," I said, and my voice was harder than I intended. "You were destroying me systematically. Every time you lied about me to your colleagues, every time you turned down an opportunity on my behalf without telling me, every time you made me feel like I should be grateful, you tolerated my presence. You were destroying the person I was." "I know." The words were barely a whisper. "I know, and I'm sorry. And I know sorry isn't enough." We sat in silence outside. The sun was setting, painting our living room in shades of amber and shadow. "I lost my job," Emma said finally. "But you know that. What you don't know is that I'm probably not going to get another one. Not at that level. Word spreads in our industry. The woman who fabricated her credentials, who lied about her circumstances, who used her husband's skills without acknowledgement. That's who I am now professionally." "You made your choices," I said. "I did, and I'm living with them. I've applied for positions at smaller firms, consulting gigs, anything. I've had 3 interviews. All of them ended when they checked my references. I should have felt sympathy. She was my wife and she was struggling. But all I could think was, I spent 7 years making myself smaller so you could get ahead, and you wasted it all on lies." "What do you want from me, Emma?" I asked. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand that I'm not asking you to save me. she said. I'm not asking you to fix my career or protect my reputation or sacrifice yourself again. I'm just asking. I'm asking if there's any way we can start over from honesty this time. Start over, I repeated. Do you hear how absurd that sounds? We've been married for 7 years. We have a history, a home, a life together. You can't just delete 7 years and start fresh. Then what do we do? She asked desperately. Do we just end it? Throw away everything because I made terrible choices? Were they choices, Emma? Or were they who you are? The question landed like a stone in still water. What do you mean? She asked, though I could tell she knew. I mean, was lying about me a series of bad decisions, or is it fundamental to who you are? Are you someone who made mistakes, or are you someone whose entire identity is built on fiction? Emma was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. I don't know. I honestly don't know. For so long, I've been performing at work, at home, everywhere. I don't know if there's a real me underneath all the lies, or if I'm just lies all the way down. It was the most honest thing she'd said since this all began. Then how can I trust you? I asked. How can I rebuild a marriage with someone who doesn't know if they're capable of being honest? Maybe you can't, she said, and tears were streaming down her face now. Maybe I've broken this beyond repair, but David, I want to try. I want to learn who I am without the lies, and I want to do that with you, if you'll let me. I stood up, walked to the window. The street outside was quiet, peaceful, normal, like the world wasn't full of marriages collapsing and lives being rebuilt from rubble. I met someone in Frankfurt, I said, not looking at her. A woman, Dr. Bauer, head of the German cybersecurity office. Brilliant, accomplished, interested in my work. We had dinner 3 times. Behind me, I heard Emma's sharp intake of breath. Nothing happened, I continued, but it could have. She was smart and funny, and she looked at me like I was someone worth knowing, not someone to hide or diminish or use when convenient. Someone with inherent value, David. And I realized something. I realized that for the first time in 7 years, I felt seen, actually seen, by a stranger who'd known me for 3 days. I turned to look at Emma. That's what you took from me. Not just professional opportunities or social connections. You took the feeling of being seen, of being known and valued for who I actually am. I see you now, Emma said desperately. I see you, David. I see how brilliant you are, how accomplished, how much I diminished you. You see me now because you have no choice, I interrupted. Your lies got exposed. Your career collapsed. You see me now because there's no more performance to maintain. But Emma, I needed you to see me when it was hard, when seeing me fully might have made you uncomfortable or insecure. That's when I needed you to choose honesty. And you chose lies instead. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with it. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to cross the room and hold her like I had 1,000 times before, but I couldn't, because the woman I'd been holding all those times had been performing. And I didn't know if the woman crying on my couch now was real or just another role. What do you need? Emma asked through her tears. Tell me what you need for there to be any hope. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I need time, I said finally. Not days or weeks, months, maybe a year. I need to keep building the life I started building in Europe, the career, the connections, the version of myself that isn't reduced to fit your narrative. And I need to do that without worrying about your feelings or your comfort or whether it threatens you. Okay, she said quickly. Okay, I can give you that. And I need you to figure out who you are, I continued. Not who you pretend to be, not who you think you should be, who you actually are, without the performance. Because I can't be married to a fiction, Emma. I won't do it again. I'm in therapy, she said, 3 times a week. I'm working on it. Good. Keep working on it. And maybe in 6 months or a year we can revisit this, see if there's anything real enough to rebuild from. But we're not getting divorced. The hope in her voice was painful to hear. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not saying yes, and I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to find out if I can forgive you, if I can trust you, if the person you become without the lies is someone I can love. That's fair, she whispered. That's more than fair. In the meantime, I continued, I think you should find your own place, an apartment, a rental, something. I need the house to myself. I need space that isn't full of memories of who we pretended to be. Emma nodded, wiping at her face. I can do that. I have some savings. Not much trailed off after being fired after losing everything. I'll help with the deposit, I said. Not because I owe you, but because despite everything, I don't want you to suffer. Thank you, she said. David, thank you for not just ending it completely, for giving me any chance at all. Don't thank me yet, I said. You might decide this is too hard, that being honest, being real, being vulnerable. You might decide it's easier to find someone new who doesn't know all your lies, someone you can perform for without the weight of exposure. I won't, she said fiercely. I won't do that again. I can't. Living in that lie, watching it all collapse, I can't do it again. Then prove it, I said. Prove it by doing the work, by being honest, even when it's uncomfortable, by becoming someone real. She stood up, gathered her things. At the door, she turned back. I do love you, David. I know I showed it wrong for 7 years, but I do love you. I believe that you think you do, I said carefully. But Emma, you love the version of me that made you feel good about yourself. The small, simple version that let you feel bigger. I don't know if you can love the real me, the big, accomplished, not going to shrink anymore me. I want to learn how, she said. Then learn. She left, and I stood in the doorway watching her drive away. The street was painted in twilight now, that liminal space between day and night, between what was and what would be. I closed the door and stood in my house. My house, not our house anymore, and felt the weight of 7 years lifting off my shoulders. I was 42 years old. I had a thriving career, international connections, opportunities I'd spent years turning down. I had languages and experience and expertise that the world wanted. I had myself back, fully, completely, without reduction or apology. And Emma had a chance to find herself too, to become someone real instead of a performance. Whether that person would be someone I could love, someone I could rebuild with, I didn't know. But I knew this. I would never again make myself small for someone else's comfort. Never again hide my light to make someone else feel brighter. Never again participate in my own eraser. I was done being a ghost in my own life. My phone buzzed, a text from Wilhelm Weber. Welcome home. The Singapore office wants to schedule a meeting about the ASEAN cybersecurity project. They're asking specifically for you. Also, Dr. Bauer from Frankfurt has reached out about a collaboration proposal. You're in demand, my friend. I smiled and typed back. Schedule them both. I'm ready. I walked to the home office, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, and I looked at my calendar for the next 6 months. Singapore, Berlin, Brussels, Sao Paulo, Tokyo. The whole world opening up before me like a flower in the sun because I was finally letting myself bloom. I pulled up the document I'd started writing weeks ago, the one about 7 years of diminishment and the journey back to wholeness. I added a new section. This is what I learned. You can't make someone small without making yourself smaller too. Emma thought she was enlarging herself by reducing me, but really, she was reducing us both. She made herself into someone who needed to lie to feel valuable, and she made me into someone who accepted invisibility as love. But here's the truth she never understood. People who are secure in their worth don't need to diminish others. They don't need to perform or lie or create fictions. They can stand next to someone brilliant and feel no threat, only joy. That's what partnership should be. Two people, both fully themselves, choosing each other without reduction. I don't know if Emma and I will find our way back to each other. I don't know if the person she becomes will be someone I can love, but I know this. Whoever I end up with, whether it's Emma rebuilt from honesty or someone new, it will be a partnership of equals, of two people who see each other clearly and choose each other anyway. I spent 7 years being small. The rest of my life will be spent being exactly as large as I am. And that's not arrogance. It's not ego. It's just truth. It's finally, after 7 years, just truth. I saved the document. Maybe someday I'd publish it, share the story. Maybe not. The act of writing it was enough. Outside my window, the last light faded from the sky. Night settled over the city, over my house, over the life I was rebuilding from ruins. But inside, I was full of light, because I'd finally learned the most important lesson. You can't be loved fully if you're not seen fully. And you can't be seen if you're hiding. I was done hiding. I was done being small. I was done accepting anything less than I deserved. And what I deserved was someone who could love all of me. The languages and the accomplishments and the brilliance and the complexity without needing to reduce any of it. Whether that person was Emma remade from honesty or someone I hadn't met yet, I didn't know. But I knew I'd recognize them when I found them because they'd see me, really see me. And they wouldn't need me to shrink to make room for them. They'd just stand beside me fully themselves, and we'd take up space together. That's what love should be. That's what I would accept. Nothing less, ever.